I never thought my world would shatter in a dingy motel parking lot. I trusted her with my life, but that trust was ripped apart in an instant. I sat there, hidden, watching her with another man. My heart pounded and tears blurred my vision as I captured their betrayal through my lens. Every click of the camera felt like a stab to my soul. She said it was just a mistake, but I knew better. This was no accident. My revenge was swift and brutal. Now she's living in regret, and I've turned our shattered dreams into a nightmare she'll never forget. After a few years of marriage, it's the little things that start to bother you. The small comments, the surprising reactions, and the strange looks. Then there's the classic, "Please not tonight, honey. I'm too tired." Add them all up, and you start to think something is wrong in your happy home. No one wants to admit there's trouble at home, so you try to balance the doubt. You remind yourself that trust is key in any marriage. If that doesn't help, there's always denial. I'm sure she didn't mean it that way. You tell yourself, she must have misunderstood what I said, or maybe something was in her eye. And of course, yeah, she's had a rough day, maybe tomorrow. Then comes the moment. It's not really a whole day, just a moment when it all makes sense. You remember the sarcastic comments, the weird responses, the unfriendly looks, and the lack of interest in the bedroom. That's when you ask yourself, why didn't I see it sooner? Right after asking that, you feel the hurt of her betrayal. The woman you love more than anything, the one you built your life around, has been unfaithful. Your stomach tightens, you struggle to breathe, your heart races, you break into a cold sweat, and tears fill your eyes. When the shock passes, you make the same mistake everyone makes at that moment. You ask why. Depression hits hard, you feel less of a man, and you start to blame yourself. What did I do wrong? How did I lose her respect? How did I lose her love? Was I not a good husband? I know all this because I've been through it. Every thought and every emotion I felt totally defeated. It was the worst thing I've ever experienced. Sitting on a tip I got earlier in the day, I drove into the parking lot of a cheap motel. My stomach turned, and I fought the urge to vomit when I saw my wife's car parked in front of one of the rooms. I parked my car in a far corner of the lot and waited. In the next 20 minutes, I asked myself all those questions, felt all those emotions, and cried as my heart broke bit by bit. Then I saw my wife leave one of the rooms holding hands with her boss. I grabbed my camera from the seat next to me and started taking pictures of them as they shared a goodbye kiss. As a professional photographer, I rarely used my camera's autofocus, but thank goodness for it because I couldn't have gotten a clear photo through my tears without it. The strong zoom lens let me focus on Jean as she looked lovingly at her new partner. I kept clicking the shutter without really thinking about it. It felt like second nature. After they drove off in different cars, I just sat there. Why didn't I run up and punch the guy? I was mad at myself, but I was too shocked to even think of doing that. I kept replaying what I had just seen in my mind. If I didn't have the pictures as evidence, I might have thought I was imagining things. I wondered how long their affair had been going on. Were they in love? Or was it just a fling? Then I realized it didn't matter, my marriage was over. I felt lost and started shaking all over. That's when I really started to cry. I pounded my hand against the steering wheel in frustration. The last time I cried this hard was when my dog Brooklyn passed away. He was a beautiful Doberman who had been my best friend and protector until one morning he didn't wake up. I was 10 years old then. What now? I wondered as I tried to calm down. I remembered a recent talk Jean and I had about starting a family. When we first got married, I was still building my photography business, so we decided to wait on kids until we didn't need Jean's paycheck. Since then, I had grown the business to a 6-figure income. I didn't need a studio because I did most of my work on location, so I worked from home. This saved us money and gave us tax benefits. We didn't need Jean's salary anymore, so we talked about her quitting to become a stay-at-home mom. I thought she'd be excited, but she was hesitant and said she needed more time. After what I saw today, I think she had other reasons for not wanting to quit. I sighed deeply. I wanted kids with all my heart, but maybe it's better this way, I thought. Just as I decided to go home and show Jean the pictures, my cell phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw it was Jack Northrup, an old friend. Years ago, I worked as a photographer for one of the biggest newspapers in the state. Jack was an investigative reporter there, one of the best. He and I did several projects together. We have been great friends ever since. At first, I was going to let the call go to voicemail. Then I thought, why not take it? I could really use a friend right now. "Hello," I answered, trying to sound normal, but failed. "Hey, buddy, you okay? You sound a bit down. Everything all right?" I paused. Did I really want to share that my wife was cheating on me? Heck, people would find out anyway. It's not something you can hide for long. No, Jack. Actually, things are pretty bad, I said. "I'm sorry to hear that, Dalton. Is there anything I can do?" he asked. "Well, to be honest, Jack, I just need someone to talk to. Look, I was calling to see if you could meet me for a beer at Plato's place soon. When can you get away?" "Oh, shoot," I said, realizing the time. "I'm already late. I was supposed to meet a client and take pictures of some homes. He's a real estate developer." "Forget it. I'll call and tell him I'm really sick, which isn't a lie right now. I'll call him and reschedule. I can be at Plato's in 20 minutes, I told him. "I'll see you there, my friend." As soon as we hung up, I called my client and rescheduled the shoot. He wasn't happy, but I couldn't focus on the job anyway. Jack was already sitting at the bar when I walked in. He didn't say anything, probably not wanting to embarrass me, but he glanced at my eyes, which were still red and puffy from crying. "Why don't you grab a beer then? Let's go over there," he said, pointing at a table in the back of the room. "It's a bit more private. You can tell me what's going on." It was hard to talk about. We both sat in silence for a couple of minutes while I tried to figure out how to start. I had an appointment today. It was near where Jean works and I had some time, so I stopped by around noon to see if she was free for lunch. Beverly, one of her co-workers, told me I had just missed her. She had already left for lunch. When I asked if she knew where Jean had gone, she said she didn't know, but the way she said it, I don't know. It seemed strange, like she was hiding something. I paused and took a sip of my beer, taking a deep breath to keep from crying again. It's hard to talk about your wife being with someone else. Anyway, like I said, I got some strange vibes from her. Then on my way out, another woman approached me. I'd never seen her before, but evidently she didn't like Jean very much because she told me if I wanted to find my wife, I should go to the Holly Hotel on Dempster. I initially thought she meant Jean was eating at that place, but then I remembered the name. It was a rundown place I had driven past many times. They didn't have a restaurant. I drove over there and saw Jean's car in the parking lot. "Oh man, Dalton, I'm sorry. I can't believe Jean would cheat on you. Are you sure it was her car?" "Yes, it was hers. She has custom plates," I said. "What did you do? What could I do?" I didn't know which room she was in. I parked in the back where she wouldn't see me and waited. After about 20 minutes, she came out holding hands with Irv Jackson. "He's her boss. Maybe he's forcing her. You know, like sleep with me or you're fired." Jack suggested trying to give me hope. I doubt it. When I say boss, I don't mean he can fire her. He's a sales rep who travels around selling industrial lights. Jean handles his orders and ships them out. Wow, I can't believe it. Jean loves you. Did you guys have a big fight? Why would she do that to you? Why? Why keep asking myself? No, we haven't had any big fights. She's been grouchy the last few months, but nothing major. So, what are you going to do? Divorce, I guess. I'm not staying married to a woman who doesn't love or respect me. We sat in silence for a few minutes before Jack spoke again. How bad do you want to get back at her? What do you mean? I mean, if it were me, I'd want revenge on him and her. You're hurting, but you have to be angry too. Of course I'm angry, I replied, a bit annoyed. What are you getting at? Do you have any proof of the affair? Well, I have some pictures of them kissing when they came out of the room. No, that's not enough. You need more, Jack said. More? I don't get it. What are you talking about? This is Illinois. Adultery is illegal here, my friend, he said with a smirk. It is? Are you sure? Yep, it's a Class A misdemeanor. They'll probably never get charged. But between you and me, we know a good number of cops. I bet we can get them arrested and put in jail for a day or so, maybe even get the newspaper to write about it. Jack saw that he had my interest. Think about it. If they actually get arrested, it would make the news. I bet I could get the paper to write the story. If you're there with your camera, we might even get them to print the photos too. Want your name in the paper? He asked with a sly smile. With all the pain I had been going through, I never thought of getting back at them, but now it sounded really good. You'll need some proof, though, enough for probable cause. How am I supposed to get that? I asked, forgetting for a moment that I was talking to one of the best reporters around. Does she use a smartphone? He asked. Yeah, only that. We don't even have a landline, I replied. Okay, I know they work together, but I bet they still talk on the phone. Text messages, calls, pictures, something. You can go online and get spyware for her phone. It's not cheap, $200 or $300, but it's a little thing you plug into her phone, then download the program. It literally takes seconds. It lets you see incoming and outgoing calls, text messages, dates on her calendar, all kinds of stuff. The good ones even turn her phone into a listening device like a bug. If they're within range, you can hear everything they say to each other. It even lets you track her with the GPS, and you can watch everything from your computer. Are you serious? Is that legal? Well, technically no. He thought for a second. Is her phone in your name or hers? He asked. Mine. Well, the company's really. Why? Well, you're supposed to tell everyone on the call that you're recording, but there's a small rule about recording calls made for illegal reasons. Since cheating is a crime, you could say your phone was used for unlawful stuff. Are you sure? Tapping a phone is a federal crime. I could end up in more trouble than either of them. Jack thought for a moment before he spoke. Don't worry about it, Dalton. Go ahead and get one of those things. When the time comes, you'll make an anonymous tip to me with their room number. I'll call the police saying I believe the room is being used for criminal acts. That's all. I thought for a second. You really think this will work? Listen, half the cops around here owe me a favor. We'll make it work. I got a bit quiet. I trusted Jack completely. He wouldn't come up with a plan like this if he wasn't sure it would work. But did I really want to do this? He must have known what I was thinking. I get it, he said with understanding. You're asking yourself if you really want to get her arrested. He took a sip of his beer. That's your call. It's a big step, I know. I nodded in agreement. Even if you don't get her arrested, you should still get that spy device and find out what's really going on. See, what you saw was completely innocent, he said, though both of us doubted that. We didn't talk much longer after that. I had a lot to think about, and Jack had to get home to his wife and kids. I thought about his advice on that spy device for her phone and decided it was a good idea. As unlikely as it was, I hoped he was right about it being innocent. Yeah, right. I didn't waste any time ordering the gadget Jack mentioned. I always had my laptop with me. I used it for editing photos on the go, but I could also get online by connecting it to my smartphone. As soon as I got back in my car, I searched for what Jack was talking about. There were many options. I found one that worked as a listening device and paid extra for overnight shipping with instructions to hold it at the post office for me. It was strange, but I felt a bit better after that. One thing I hadn't mentioned was the feeling of control, or rather, the lack of it. Getting out your wife is cheating makes you see how little control you have over your life, even if you thought you did. Now, at least I was doing something. I was taking back some control. That evening, I tried to spend as much time as I could away from John. I tried to act normal, but only if you've been through it can you know how hard that is when your world is falling apart. I went into my office and pretended to edit photos from some imaginary big shoot. I waited until I knew Jean was asleep before getting into bed. Being so close to her was tearing me apart again. I finally fell asleep, but not before silently shedding more tears. The next day, I almost messed up my first job because I couldn't focus. Even the client asked if something was wrong. I did my best to stay focused, then headed to the post office around 3. I showed my ID to the lady behind the counter and told her they should be holding a package for me. 5 minutes later, she came out with it in her hands. I opened it like a kid on Christmas. I read the instructions and installed the bug on her phone that night. I set things up so I could watch everything from my laptop. It didn't take long to find something big. I had checked a few times early in the morning, but found nothing. Around 10:30, I saw Irv had sent my wife a text. She hadn't replied yet. Irv. Hey, beautiful, I don't have much to do on Friday. Want to meet up? If she said yes, I had 2 days to come up with a plan. Problem was, I didn't know what to do yet. I was leaning back in my car seat trying to think when I heard a phone ring. Hello, it was Irv. Hey, it's me. I got your text, but I couldn't answer because Beverly was right next to me, said my wife. Hell, Jean, she must know something by now. She's not stupid. Yeah, I know, she replied. But there's no need to make it obvious. She even covered for me the other day. She told Dalton that I had already left when he came to take me out for lunch. Well, she was probably telling the truth. He scoffed. Yeah, I know. But I'm wondering why Dalton didn't say anything about stopping by. He's been quiet the last couple of nights, too. Do you think he suspects something? God, it would crush him if he found out. Hell, Jean, you're the one living with him, not me. What do you think? I haven't seen him since the company picnic a couple of months ago. He didn't seem suspicious then. We even talked about how fast kids grow up. Yeah, he mentioned it when we got home. He said he thought you were a good dad. Now you're making me feel bad. Damn it. I like your husband. Yeah, I think he likes you too. Maybe I'm just feeling guilty. I thought about him coming to take me out for lunch while you and I were together, and it reminded me of what we're really doing. At first, it seemed like harmless fun, but now it's clear we're both cheating. Geez, I can't even think about what would happen if they found out. I don't know about Marge, but it would destroy Dalton. I doubt he'd ever forgive me, Irv. We're playing with fire here. Yeah, Marge too. She'd probably kick me out for good. What do you think? Should we cool it for a while? There was a long silence before Jean answered. Actually, I've been kind of sharp with him the last few months. That might be why he's quiet. Every time he talks, I snap at him. I think I'm doing it to defend myself. The closer he and I are, the guiltier I feel. So if I put some distance between us, I don't feel quite so bad. That's not right, though. I've got to stop that. Dalton hasn't done anything for me to be mean to him. So what do you think? Are we on for Friday or not? Irv asked her. Yeah, let's stick with Friday. But maybe we should take a break after that. I need to spend time with my husband. I really do love him, you know, she said. Dalton heard Irv laugh on the other end of the phone. Yeah, I know you do. I love my wife, too. Okay, Friday at our usual time, and then we'll take a break for a while. Okay, she responded. Are you coming into the office today? No, not today. I'm busy. I'll be in tomorrow, but not until around 4, he replied. The rest of the call was about work. I slowly closed my laptop. Friday was only 2 days away. If I wanted to get them caught, I had to call Jack right away so he had time to set things up. I leaned forward and put my head against the steering wheel to think. There were so many things to think about. Maybe I could just look the other way, just this once. It sounds like this would be the last time, at least for a while, and she did say she loved me. Maybe I could let things cool down for a while, then tell Jean I knew about the affair and tell her not to do it again. No, I thought as my anger came back. What am I thinking? I won't live my life like that, worried, wondering where she is every time she's 10 minutes late. No, I couldn't live like that. I won't live like that. After 2 days of thinking, my final decision was made in a blink. Hello, is Jack Northrup there, please? I covered the phone with a cloth. I had no idea if it really changed my voice or not, but they do it in all the mystery movies, so why not? Yeah, can I ask who's calling? The voice on the other end of the line asked. No, just tell him I have some information about some illegal activity that will be taking place on Friday. Just a minute, please, he said before calling out to Jack about an anonymous caller on line 3. This is Jack Northrup. Can I help you? I will not give you my name, Mr. Northrup, but I wanted to inform you there will be some illegal activity going on in one of the rooms at the Holly Motel on Dempster this Friday around noon. I understand, said Jack. I will have the police there to check it out. Well, it was done. Now all I had to do was live with my decision. I also had to live with Jean for the next 2 days. How was I going to do that, I wondered. It sounded like she was planning to be nice to me when she was talking to Irv. She can be very sweet when she wants to be. I imagined her cuddling with me on the couch, maybe with some wine. Once we got to bed, she wouldn't want to stop. She knew how to make me happy. I was really going to miss her, I thought, as tears rolled down my cheeks. After thinking for a bit, I came up with a plan. Even though I had never done it on short notice before, I did sometimes have to travel. I already canceled everything I had scheduled for the rest of the week. I went home and packed a bag. Soon I was checked into a motel a few miles away and ready to make a call. My laptop was open and ready to connect once I finished the call. Hi, honey, she answered, sounding happy. I was just thinking about you. You were? I tried to sound cheerful. What were you thinking? Well, work has been crazy these last few months, and I've taken it out on you. I want to make it up to you. I thought we could get a nice hotel for the weekend and spend 2 full days and nights together, she said, laughing. Normally, my heart would race hearing her talk like that, but knowing the truth made me even sadder. I tried to use that sadness as I replied, Honey, I'm sorry, but I won't be around this weekend. Won't be around? She almost screamed. What do you mean? Where are you going? I just got an out-of-town assignment, honey. The money is too good to pass up. I'm already on my way and won't be back until late Saturday night. She didn't say anything for about 15 or 20 seconds. "Honey, what's going on? This isn't like you," she finally said, sounding worried. "I had to act well now." "Things wrong, honey." "This just came up," I said, trying to make it seem important. "Can't you postpone it? I was really looking forward to this weekend, babe." "Honey, this is a chance to get a major client from one of the biggest studios in the city," I said, making it up as I went. "There is a big advertising shoot tomorrow in Logan County, but the other studio messed up. It'll cost the client thousands if it doesn't get done. Someone recommended me. If I saved the shoot, we could get a new client worth a lot of money each year. Honey, I can't miss this." I heard her sigh. Then there was silence before she spoke. "Fine," she said, sounding really sad. "I understand. I guess we can do it next weekend." After we said goodbye, I dialed up the internet on my laptop. I expected her to call Irv right away, but nothing happened. She must have put her phone on her desk because when I turned on the listening device, I heard her moving papers around. "Irv just sent these purchase orders by fax. He wants you to check if we have everything. If not, call him," a voice said. Then I heard my wife's voice. "Okay, thanks, Beverly," she said. There was silence. Then my wife spoke again. "Beverly, what's wrong? We used to be friends, but you haven't talked to me nicely for months. What's going on?" "Okay, since you asked, I used to think you were a good person. You have a wonderful husband, but you ignored him. He deserves better. You're just a bad person," Beverly said with anger. I heard Jean gasp. Then it seemed like Beverly left the room. My wife started to cry. I worried that her co-worker's harsh words might change Jean's mind about her plans with Irv, but she just cried quietly. I kept listening to my wife's conversations to make sure the police wouldn't raid an empty room on Friday. The only other time she talked to Irv was on Thursday afternoon when he visited the office. They mostly talked about work. At the end, Jean said she regretted their affair, but when Irv asked again about their meeting the next day, she said it would be their last for a while. I couldn't sleep at all on Thursday night. I kept asking myself if I was doing the right thing. Maybe with counseling we could fix this. Maybe possibly. What if I thought these words all night long? But as the sun rose, I knew my marriage was over. This was revenge on him and her. We shall understand how much she hurt me when they lead her away in cuffs. But then I doubted it. If you haven't been through it, you can't understand the kind of pain it causes. At 11 o'clock Friday morning, I met with my private little team at the place we had planned behind the restaurant across the street. Jack was there with Dave Weiland, a sergeant in our local police force and a friend we'd known for years. With him was another officer who looked familiar, but I didn't know his name, and a rather strong female officer. Dave made the introductions and told me they had already spoken to the desk clerk. He would put them in room 113. Dave already had the key card. We planned to wait for about 20 minutes before making any moves. Dave had a complaint form ready for me to sign. Around 11:30, a car arrived and a man went to the office. I couldn't see his face well from across the street. He returned to his car and waited. "Here she comes," I said when I saw Jean's car driving in. She parked next to the other car and waited for Irv. He got out with a small suitcase and kissed her on the cheek before they went into room 113. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked Dave. "You can still change your mind." "Yeah," said Jack. "If you do this, there's no going back, Dalton." "I know," I said sadly. I thought about it all night. I felt tears in my eyes, but I was determined. I set my camera on autofocus. "Let's get it over with," I said. We all got into 2 police cars and drove to the motel, blocking their cars in. Police were coming in. Yelled Dave as he knocked on the door. Another officer used the key card to open it, and they rushed in. Jack and I waited until the others were inside before entering. Through the doorway, I saw Irv jump from the bed completely naked. He started shouting, "I know what this looks like, but it's all consensual." "Jean, tell them I didn't force you. This isn't rape. You've got to believe me." At the same time, Jean was screaming, asking Irv what was going on. When I walked in, I saw her lying on the bed, naked. Her hands were cuffed to the headboard, and she was wearing a black blindfold. Her legs were tied to the corners of the bed frame, and she had a vibrator strapped to her. "Irv, please." "Oh my God, what's going on? Please tell me." She was screaming. Irv was too busy talking to the cops to answer her. He didn't notice me until I started taking pictures. He saw the flash and turned towards me looking shocked. "Oh no!" he said, realizing what was happening. What? Jean cried out. Tell me what's happening, please. She was now crying in fear. It's Dalton, Irv told her sadly. No, she screamed. No, no, it can't be. Oh, God, no. By that time, Dave and the other male officer moved Irv out of the way so the female officer could get to Jean. Where are the keys for these? She asked, pointing to the cuffs. Over there, on the table, Irv replied, looking sad. As soon as they took off the cuffs, Jean pulled off her blindfold and looked very scared. No, oh my God, no, she cried, putting her hands over her face. She didn't even try to cover herself. I wasn't sure if it was because she was in shock or because she thought it was too late. The woman police officer picked up half a sheet and covered her. Irv Jackson, Jean Conrad. I'm placing you both under arrest for cheating, Dave told them. Arrest? Cheating? Wait a minute, Irv shouted. You can't arrest us for this. It's not against the law. It is, and we can, Mr. Jackson. Now put some clothes on, Dave said, pointing to the pile of men's clothes on the floor. As he dressed, the woman cop went around the bed and untied my wife. I saw Jean's hand moving under the sheet as she removed the clamps and the small device herself. Dalton, listen, man, I'm sorry. Neither of us wanted to hurt you, but come on, please stop this, Irv pleaded, tears running down his face. Please think of my family, my kids. You jerk, I shouted as Jack held me back. You didn't think about my family. What about my marriage? My kids who will never be born now? I hope they throw you in jail and lose the key. I screamed. Irv's whimpering turned into loud crying when she heard my angry words. She didn't even try to plead. She knew it was over. I heard her saying how sorry she was over and over between sobs, but it was too late. Once Irv had his clothes on, they put cuffs on him, and we all went outside so the woman cop could help Jean get dressed. About 10 minutes later, the door opened, and she led my wife out in cuffs, too. Our eyes met for a moment as they put her in the back of the police car. It was hard to tell who was sadder. We both knew our dreams and our future together were gone. All right, the show's over, Dave yelled to the crowd that had gathered. Go on, mind your own business. He turned to me as the people started to leave. You don't need to come to the station, he said. We already have your complaint. I nodded sadly. What happens now? I asked. They'll be processed and held in a cell until later tonight. Then they'll be let go probably around 2 or 3 in the morning. Once we have a court date, everyone involved will be notified. I'm sure you'll hear from the DA. But to be honest, Dalton, I doubt they'll want to press charges. Yeah, I said, trying not to cry in front of everyone. I figured that out. You said she won't get out until 2 or 3. How will she get home that late? With all my thoughts about the arrest, I never thought about what would come after. She'll have to call a cab, Dave said. I'd send a tow truck and take the vehicles, but that would just cost you money, not her. So I'll leave both cars here. Unless you'd like to drive her car to the station and leave it in our lot. I'm sure Jack would give you a ride back to your car. Can you just take his car then? I asked. Yeah, we can do that. We were in a bad neighborhood, and I didn't want Jean coming back here at 2 in the morning, so that's what we did. Once we were all at the station, Dave showed Jean where her car would be when she got out later that night. He looked at each other again as I walked over to Jack's car. I've never seen such sad eyes in my life. Dave, I know I'm pushing my luck here, but can I ask for one more favor? I asked. Sure, Dalton, he replied. Can you make sure they don't get out at the same time? I don't want that guy asking her for a ride home. No problem, buddy. I'll make sure he gets out an hour or 2 after Jean. Thanks. Oh, and I won't mind if he's put in a cell with a tough guy who'll give him a hard time, I said, forcing a smile. I'll see what I can do, Dave said, smiling back. On the way to my car, I pulled out my phone and made a call. Worthington Industries, said the receptionist. Beverly Billings, please, I replied. 1 moment, please. Hello, this is Beverly. How can I help you? Beverly, this is Dalton Conrad. I just thought I'd let you know that neither my wife nor Irv Jackson will be coming back to work today. They're both in jail, she said, sounding worried. What did they do? You know what they did and have been doing. Adultery is against the law in this state, you know. Oh, and thanks, Beverly. If I ever know your husband is cheating on you, I'll make sure to keep it from you. Just like you did to me, I said, my voice full of anger. Dalton, I hung up on her. To me, she was part of my wife's betrayal. Forget her, too. Jack and I stopped for lunch, but I wasn't very hungry. I managed to eat about half a burger and drink a bottle of beer. Jack didn't bring up the shocking scene we had just seen, but it played over and over in my mind. 7 years of marriage, and I had no idea she was into that sort of thing. Jack suggested I get really drunk and go home with him. Even though it sounded tempting, I wasn't going to start feeling sorry for myself. If I did, I might never stop. I had a business to run and a marriage to end. I had no time for self-pity. I can't count how many times I've walked into my empty house, probably hundreds, but this time felt different. It wasn't just empty, it felt lonely. It felt like the house itself was sad, with misery dripping from the walls and sadness filling the air like a heavy fog. I walked through memories of laughter and happy times on my way to the bedroom. By the time I got there, my face was wet with old tears. I fell onto the bed, crying myself to sleep. On the same bed I once shared with the only woman I had ever loved. When I tried to open my eyes, they were stuck with dried tears. I rubbed some of the crust away and blinked to clear my vision. I was still dressed, but I felt cold and sweaty. The pillow under my cheek was damp. I looked at the clock by the bed. It was 4 a.m. I lay there trying to remember what day it was. It was Saturday, when everything came flooding back and my eyes filled with tears again. After a few minutes, I stumbled to the washroom to rinse my face. The cold water helped me wake up. I began to remember more about the day before. It was a little after 5 o'clock in the afternoon when I had hit the bed. Wow, I thought. I just slept for 11 hours. I must have been really drained emotionally without even knowing it. I wondered if Jean made it home after being let out of jail. She didn't have anywhere else to go unless she stayed in a motel. But I thought I had made it clear she should come home. After all, we still had to talk about the terms of the divorce. No sense putting it off. If we could act like 2 adults through the weekend and sort things out, I could see my lawyer on Monday. I took a quick shower and put on some casual clothes. I checked the spare bedroom to see if she was there, but it hadn't been touched. I felt a bit worried, but not like I used to. She was free now, or would be soon. It wasn't my job to worry about her anymore. I went downstairs to make a pot of coffee. As soon as I reached the last step and turned the corner, I saw her lying on the couch. I walked up and looked down at her. I'd never seen her look so bad. Not just her eyes, but her whole face was red and puffy. Her makeup was all smeared, making her look like a sad clown. Her usually soft brown hair seemed darker and was stuck together from tears she had cried, probably while lying down in her cell. I really wanted to hug her tight and tell her everything would be okay. Instead, I kept strong and went to the kitchen to make some coffee. I sat at the head of the table where I could see her through the doorway. It seemed like she was having bad dreams because her arm would jerk every now and then or she'd let out a little yell. I was on my 3rd cup of coffee and still couldn't think straight. I needed a distraction. I looked out the window and saw the first light of dawn. A park with a pretty little lake was just a few blocks away. I had been there often, but never at sunrise. I grabbed my camera and walked there. I needed some time to think. It turned out to be a very good morning. By the time the sun came up, I had already found the best spots to take pictures. I got several beautiful shots of the early morning sun shining on the water and through the trees. As I was about to head back home, I saw 2 soccer teams getting ready at the other end of the park. I spent the next few hours taking action shots. I gave my business card to both coaches and told them to contact me for the pictures. Between the team and players wanting their photos, I was sure I'd make a few $100s that morning. I was about to leave the park when I saw Judy Anderson. She lived a couple of streets away from us. I had heard she was pregnant but hadn't seen her to say congrats. My info was right because she was walking with a baby buggy. "Judy," I called out as I walked over. "Congrats on your new baby," I said, looking into the buggy. "Hi, Dalton, thank you so much," she replied proudly. "Is it a boy or a girl?" "It's a boy, Stephen Gregory," she answered. "He'll be 3 weeks old tomorrow. He's absolutely beautiful," I said. Seeing her with her newborn son only reminded me of what I had lost. Even before Jean and I got married, I dreamed of us being proud parents. Now it didn't look like that was going to happen. "Judy, the sun is still low, perfect for pictures. Would you like a few free shots of you and Stephen?" "Oh, Dalton, would you?" she asked, looking excited. "Absolutely. Let's go to that tree. You can sit with him in your arms there." "Is that okay? Anything you say, you're the photographer?" she said happily. I found a nice grassy spot where the sun would highlight her blonde hair. I used a little flash to fix any harsh shadows. It was one of the nicest photos I had taken in a long time. I got 2 shots before little Steven started moving around. He's probably hungry, his mother said. I guess we should go home. I'd be too embarrassed to feed him here, she said, smiling. Why would you be embarrassed? I asked, not thinking. Well, I breastfeed, she said shyly. Judy, there's no one around except those guys playing soccer, I pointed out. And they're too far away to see anything. Just use a diaper to cover up. I'll leave and give you some privacy, I told her. Before you go, It was clear she wanted to say something but was hesitant. Yes, I asked, trying to lighten the mood. Well, you know what I've always liked? I shook my head. Those pictures of mothers nursing their babies, she said finally. You want a picture of you nursing Stephen? I asked, trying to hide my own awkwardness. She was younger than Jean and me, maybe 23 or 24. She and her husband had moved into their house a couple of years ago. She was really beautiful, and I was trying hard to stay professional. She looked up at me, shyly. Would you mind? No, not at all. I'll turn my back until you're ready. I heard her moving around. Okay, I'm ready, she said. I turned around to see Stephen nursing in his mother's arms, but she had on a big, heavy white nursing bra that ruined the shot. I took a couple of photos but knew it wasn't what she wanted. I decided to be honest. Judy, your bra is ruining the picture. I know the kind of picture you're looking for, and that nursing bra isn't helping. She looked down at it. Yeah, I see what you mean, she said, suddenly looking up at me in surprise. Do you want me to take it off? She asked, sounding surprised. I shrugged. I'm not trying to be creepy, but if you want the photo to look natural, the bra needs to come off, I explained. She paused for a moment, then handed the baby to me. Can you hold Stephen while I take it off? If someone had told me this morning that I'd be holding a baby while his pretty mom undressed, I would have laughed. But here I was, holding this sweet baby and quietly wishing I'd have my own child someday. When she was ready, I gave the baby back to her. She held him close and he started nursing eagerly. The morning sun cast a warm yellow glow on them, making them look like angels. The light through her blouse highlighted the main part of the photo, the baby breastfeeding. I felt awe as I looked through my camera. This was nature's most wonderful gift, life. After the shoot, I told Judy I had been a photographer for 20 years. I've taken thousands of photos, but none were as beautiful as this one. I asked if her husband would mind if I gave them a framed picture to hang. Judy teared up with joy and said they would be honored. On my way home, I thought about what I had just seen. Would I ever be lucky enough to experience such joy? Would I ever hold my own baby? These thoughts made me feel cold inside. When I got home, I saw Jean through the patio doors. She turned when she heard me. She had showered but wasn't wearing makeup. Her face was a little swollen, but she looked more like herself. Hello, Dalton, she said, almost crying. I finished the coffee. I'll make more in a couple of minutes. Have you had breakfast? She asked softly. No, why don't you make us some eggs, then we need to talk, I said while heading to my office. I spent a few minutes looking through the photos I'd just taken, planning to edit them later. When I came back, Jean was setting the table and she was shaking all over except for a few sobs from Jean. Breakfast was mostly quiet. When we finished eating, I put the dishes in the dishwasher. I poured us more coffee and sat back down. Dalton? She said, her voice shaking. I know. Tears started to fall. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, she cried, looking down, unable to meet my eyes. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I don't want to lose you. It was a stupid mistake. I'm really sorry, she said, before breaking down completely. Even though my heart was broken, part of it still loved her. I got up and brought her a box of tissues. I stood beside her for a moment. The caring husband in me wanted to hold her and comfort her, but the hurt husband, full of pain, wouldn't let me. Without a word, I went back to my seat and watched as she tried to calm down. She saw my response to her plea. As she dried her eyes, she asked, It's not going to happen, is it? There's no chance for us, is there? Still looking down. I'm afraid not, Jean. I'm sorry. When I first saw you with her, I thought I was going to die. I had never felt so hurt in my life. I won't say I don't still love you because I do, but it's a broken love. It's damaged beyond repair. I could never be with the person who hurt me this much. Nodding her head, still wiping her tears. She accepted what she already knew. The man she loved wanted out of her life. I knew when you had us arrested that you were telling me it was over. I was so scared. At first, I didn't even understand why we were being arrested, but when that policewoman read my rights and told me the charges, I knew I had lost the man I love, she whimpered. I was struggling too. I had to ask, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Why, Jean? We were so happy together. We were perfect for each other. Why would you do this to us? What did I do to deserve this? I asked, failing to fight back my tears. Oh God, Dalton, you didn't do anything wrong, nothing at all. This was all my mistake. Pure and simple, she said emphatically. You saw me in that motel room. He had me tied up. It was all about that bondage thing. I was curious, that's all. Too embarrassed to talk to you about it. I don't get it. You were too embarrassed to talk to me, but not Irv Peterson. Why did you feel more comfortable talking to him instead of your husband? It doesn't make sense, I said, feeling confused and hurt. Did he convince you to do it? By now, Jean could probably see the anger growing on my face. No, he didn't convince me. Not exactly. He was already interested in that stuff, she said, but then changed her mind. Well, not exactly, but he imagined it. She seemed upset, fidgeting with a tissue. Do you remember when Irv and I went to that lighting convention downtown? Geez, that was almost a year ago. You guys have been doing this since then? I asked, clenching my fist. She shook her head. No, not really. I jumped up from the table in anger. What do you mean, not really, John? Come on, either you did or you didn't. She flinched at my outburst. We talked about it, that's all. We didn't do anything for several months, she quickly added. Irv left me alone in our booth on the convention floor for a while. I didn't know where he was, and I had left my phone in the room we were using as a base. I was talking to a guy who I thought could be a big customer, but he was asking questions I couldn't answer. I finally asked if he could wait a couple of minutes so I could go up to the room and see if Irv was there. When I got into the room, Irv was nowhere to be found, but his laptop was on the table, so I figured I could get the answers myself. I finally sat back down in my chair and tried to calm myself as I listened. The laptop was on standby mode, and when I opened it, this website about tying people up popped up. I was shocked at first, but as I looked at the pictures of those women tied up, I don't know. Something changed. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I became very excited. I started clicking on the small pictures to make them bigger. Some of the girls were fully dressed while others were completely naked. They were tied up in all kinds of different poses. Right when I was seconds away from touching myself, Irv walked in. His face turned bright red when he saw what I was looking at. I guess my face was probably just as red. She stopped again to wipe some new tears away and continued. Anyway, I tried to make a joke to lighten the mood. I asked him if that's what he and Marge did when the kids were asleep. After stammering a bit, he said it was just one of his fantasies, but that Marge knew nothing about it. I guess I looked a little surprised because then he said, I might as well tell you I'm just a pervert at heart. Then he chuckled. I let it drop and told him about the guy waiting in our booth. When I came home that night, I wanted so badly to talk to you about maybe trying a little tying up, but I was too embarrassed. I remembered what Irv said about being a weirdo, and I didn't want you to think badly of me. So I tried to forget about it for a while. Her hand was shaking as she took another sip of coffee. The problem was, I got really curious. I started looking at some websites about tying people up, and every time I did, I got really excited. I tried to find ways to drop little hints for you. I even thought of leaving my computer open like Irv did, but I knew you would only look at it if I asked you to, and then it would be too obvious. I tried to bring up the subject many times, but chickened out each time. Jean took another tissue and blew her nose. She was still struggling. Then one day we were in Irv's office working on some purchase orders. I asked him if he'd ever tried any tying up stuff. He told me he did once when he was in college. He dated a girl for a couple of months who was into it. He said he loved it, but then she left him for another guy. He met Marge, who was pretty traditional, so he just kept it as a daydream all these years. He asked me if you and I did anything like that, and I told him no. I said I'd never even thought about any kind of tying up until I saw it on his computer. We talked a little more, and he got me to admit I wouldn't mind trying it just once. He asked me if I discussed it with you, and I said no, I was too embarrassed. He said he had the same problem. Hell, if I told Marge that I wanted to tie her up, she'd probably hit me over the head with a frying pan, he said with a laugh. She took another sip of coffee and seemed to be calming down a little as she went on. That's when Irv came up with his brilliant idea. He said since we were both interested in trying it and too shy to talk about it with our partners, why not try it together? At first, I said absolutely not. That would be cheating. But he assured me we'd both keep our clothes on. It'd be fun, he said. He'd simply tie me up, and at the worst, maybe he'd touch me lightly just to give me that helpless feeling while giving him the feeling of power at the same time. I told him no way, but he kept asking. Finally, after weeks of saying no, I gave in and told him okay, but only if we both kept our clothes on. Jean stood up to get another cup of coffee. She held up the pot silently, asking if I wanted more. She poured me a cup, then went back to telling her story. For a long time, that's all we did. I kept my clothes on, and Irv would tie me up in different ways. Sometimes he'd touch my leg or my back. But we didn't do anything more than that. Then he said he couldn't really tie me the way he wanted with all my clothes on and asked me to strip down to my underwear. I was so nervous, I knew it was wrong, but I got so excited whenever he tied me up that I thought it would be even more thrilling if I wore less. We did it like that for a few months, but Irv was getting rougher each time. About a month ago, he tied me up on the bed. He blindfolded me, and for the first time, he put something in my mouth so I couldn't talk. I couldn't move or see anything. Then Irv reached around and took off my bra. He pulled my arms down and made me feel very exposed. I tried to scream at him to stop, but he didn't listen. Next, he pulled my underwear down and touched me. I was really mad, but at the same time, I felt something I never had before. "I'm so sorry," she said, wiping her eyes again. I knew right then we had gone too far and I should stop it, but I just couldn't. I made him promise never to go inside me, but I even wondered what it would be like to be tied up and hurt like that. Last week after we were done, we talked about a compromise. She would tie me up and make me use my mouth on him. Yesterday, he was just telling me to open my mouth when you guys came in. His thing never even touched my lips. She looked me in the eye for the first time that morning. "Does that mean anything?" she asked. "The fact that he never went inside me. We never had actual sex, Dalton." "Never," she said hopefully. I wished I could tell her what she wanted to hear, but I couldn't. I had to look away as I wiped a tear from my cheek. It was hard to talk, hard to get the words out. But from what you've told me, Jean, it would have happened. I mean, you started off fully clothed, and in 4 or 5 months you had gotten to giving him oral sex. You said he'd force you, but you know that's not true. You were pretending. You were going to do it willingly. Having real sex would have been next, John. It was just a matter of time. You know it, and I know it. She opened her mouth to say something. I think she wanted to assure me it wouldn't have happened, but I didn't believe it. I shook my head and held up my hand at the same time. Jean, it doesn't matter anyway. I can't forgive what you've done. I know you didn't mean for me to find out, but I did. The truth is, I've never been so hurt in my entire life. Every time I tried to hold you or kiss you, I would remember the pain. I'm sorry, babe, but there's no future for us. Once again, she broke down and started crying. It was tearing my heart out. I had to get out of there. I went upstairs and lay down on the bed. I stared at the ceiling while a few tears ran down the sides of my face. Imagining my life without Jean was something I never thought I'd have to do, and it wasn't fun. I guess I lay there for 15 or 20 minutes before Jean walked in. "I'll pack some things and go stay with my folks," she said sadly. "I'm really sorry for what I've done, Dalton. I love you with all my heart. Please believe that." I didn't answer right away. In my head, I wondered how she could hurt someone she loved so much. I took a deep breath. I still don't understand. How could you talk to Irv about private things and not me, your husband? How can you say you love me with all your heart and still do that? It doesn't make sense to me, Jean. I'm supposed to be your partner, not him. It was something I wanted to try. I wasn't sure if I would like it, so I didn't want to take the chance with you until I knew. I thought I'd try it a little with Irv first. If I liked it, then I'd tell you and see if you'd want to try. But I did like it, and I still couldn't talk to you. We had never talked about such things, and I was afraid you'd think badly of me. It was easier to keep doing it with Irv. There was no risk, or so I thought. I kept thinking I would get the courage to tell you one day, and then stop with Irv. She started crying again. "Oh, my darling, I'm so sorry." I helped her put her bags and a few other things in her car. We looked at each other one last time before she drove away. We both knew it was real. It was truly the end. She said she was sorry one more time. I stood and watched as she drove away, taking our dreams with her. I felt empty as I walked back inside. I looked around my empty house and fell to my knees, crying like a baby. It took me about half an hour to stop. I used all my strength to stand up and go to the shower. I hoped the water would wash away some of my pain, but it didn't work. I was just getting dressed when Jack called. "How are you doing, buddy? Is Jean there?" "No. She left a little while ago to go to her parents' place. She's going to stay with them," I said. He sighed, sounding sad. "Look, I've got some steaks I'm going to grill in the backyard later. Why don't you come over and help us eat one?" "I appreciate the offer, Jack, but I'm really not in the mood to hang out right now," I told him. "I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a break." "Oh," I remembered before hanging up. "Is the paper going to run the story?" "Yeah, it'll be in tomorrow's issue. They're putting it on the front page of local news. They even used the photo you took of Dave putting Herb in the squad car. I didn't put your name on the photo, though. I didn't think you'd want it." "Yeah, you're right about that. Thanks, pal." "I should call Jean and Warner," I said. "Warner." "Why?" Jack said. "Let her find out on her own." I sat and thought about what Jack said. He was probably right. I didn't owe her anything. Up until a few days ago, she was my everything. "Yeah, I know you're right, Jack. That's what I should do, but I still feel sorry for her. Did you see her face when the female cop brought her out in cuffs? God, Jack, she looks so scared. As mad and hurt as I am, I can't just shut off my feelings. I wanted to pay, but I don't want to destroy her. You do what you think is right, Dalton. That's what I did." Her dad was bringing her things into the house when she answered the phone. "Hello, Dalton," she answered carefully. "Hi. Listen, I have to warn you. I just talked to Jack. There's going to be an article about your arrest in Sunday's paper." I heard her gasp. "Oh my God, Dalton, you didn't?" Her voice turned sad. I should have guessed when I saw Jack. "Okay. Thanks for letting me know," she said, starting to cry. "I can't imagine how deeply I hurt you for you to do this. I don't blame you. I know I deserve it. I'm just so sorry, my love. I pray that someday you can forgive me." Those were her last words before she started crying again and hung up. I was glad she was staying with her parents. At that moment, I wasn't sure who was hurting more, her or me. But I guess it didn't matter. It wasn't a contest. Neither of us would ever be the same after this. For a while, I forgot my troubles and had a nice evening at Jack's house. His wife, Lynette, is a wonderful person, and his 2 kids kept me busy playing cops and robbers. Of course, I was always the robber, and I got shot and fell to the ground 3 times. It felt good to be distracted. All I'd thought about for the last 4 days was Jean's betrayal. That night was a welcome break. It was a little after 10 when I got home. Between getting up at 4 in the morning, the emotional stress of dealing with Jean and running around Jack's yard, hiding from his young detectives, I was exhausted. I dragged myself upstairs, got undressed, and was asleep before my head hit the pillow. The next morning when I woke up, I was facing Jean's side of the bed. My arm was stretched out, and I figured I must have been looking for her in my sleep. I wondered if I would ever get used to that side of the bed being empty. I started brewing some coffee, then ran upstairs to take a shower and get dressed. By the time I was done, the Sunday paper was on my porch. I picked it up, grabbed a cup of coffee, and sat down to see how badly Jack had criticized my wife. I took a sip to calm my nerves, then opened the local section. There it was, right at the top of the front page. Anyone could see it, and right next to the story was a clear photo of Irv getting into the back of a police car. I had to laugh. It was nice of him to look directly at me when I took the picture. Couple arrested for cheating by Jack Northrup, staff reporter, Arlington Hills. Acting on an anonymous tip, Arlington Hills police arrested Irving Peterson from Burlington Heights on Friday for allegedly cheating. Also arrested was Gene Conrad from Arlington Hills. "Most people don't even know this law exists," said Sergeant David Weiland of the Arlington Hills Police Department, but ignorance of the law is no excuse. The couple was taken to the Arlington Hills Police Department. Illinois is one of 23 states where cheating is a crime. It's a Class A misdemeanor with a maximum penalty of $2,500 in fines and up to 1 year in jail. The Attorney General's office had no comment on the charges, and it's unclear if they will prosecute. Well, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. He didn't mention the more personal details, thank goodness. I didn't mind exposing Irv for what he was, but I didn't want to hurt Jean more than necessary. I made some breakfast, then went into my office to work on Judy's 16x20 print. The shot was so perfect I only needed to darken the edges a bit in Photoshop to make it look more dramatic. After that, I did some chores around the house, washed the car, and mowed the lawn. This bachelor life was getting lonely. I thought Monday would never come, but it finally did. Thankfully, I had a big photo shoot that kept me busy almost all day. I was packing up my gear around 4 o'clock when my cell phone rang. I answered it in my usual business tone. "Dalton Conrad," I said. "Mr. Conrad, this is Belinda Hastings. I work with your wife." "I'm the woman who told you about the motel," she said. I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk to her. "Yes, Miss Hastings, what can I do for you?" "I was wondering if we could meet for a drink," she asked. "I thought I'd bring you up to date on what happened today." "I don't think that's a good idea," I replied. "Mr. Conrad, I'm not trying to hit on you or anything, just a heads up. Irv Peterson got fired today. Thought you should know in case he tries to mess with you or something." Now this was different. I definitely wanted to hear about Irv's firing. "Okay, when and where?" I asked. "Well, I'm about to leave here. Can you meet me at the Dewdrop Inn on Mannheim and Toohey in half an hour?" "I'll be there," I replied. She was sitting in a booth by the wall when I walked in. I hadn't noticed earlier at the office, but she was quite attractive. Maybe a bit older than Jean and me, but looked good. She smiled as I sat down and signaled the waitress. I looked up at the waitress when she came over in order to light beer. Then I turned back to my unexpected informant. "Now, Miss Hastings, you said Irv was fired? Please call me Belle. That's what everyone else does." I nodded, and she went on. "Yeah, it was pretty wild at work today. It started with Beverly this morning. She went to your wife's office to show her a news article about her getting arrested. She had a clipping and put it on Jean's desk. Bev said you blamed her for not telling you about the affair, and she was really mad at Jean. She told Jean they weren't friends anymore." I took a sip of my beer as I listened. Jean went to the restroom after Bev left. I think she went to have a good cry. Everyone in the office knew about the article, so nobody bothered her. She was back for just a few minutes when Irv burst in. He didn't even close the door, just started yelling about how she and you, he called you her jerk husband, ruined his life. I noticed a small smile on Belle's face as she took a sip of her white wine before continuing. "You should have heard the lies Irv told his wife that night when he got home," she said with a chuckle. "By the way, who gave him the black eye?" "Was that you?" she asked. "Not me, though I wish it was. It must have happened in jail because he was fine when they put him in the squad car." "I've got pictures to prove it," I said. "Did you take that picture of him getting into the squad car?" I nodded while taking another sip of beer. "So you were there for all of it? Wow, I don't think I could have done that. It had to be tough." "I guess it was kind of sweet revenge that your photo got printed," she said. "It'll probably hurt him more than a black eye would have." I remembered taking that picture, hoping it would ruin his life. "Maybe with some luck it will," Belle continued. "When he got home, he told his wife he was carjacked, trying to explain the black eye. He said his car was used in a robbery. Someone called in the license plate, and the cops took him in for questioning." "Wow," I replied. "He must have made all that up in jail." "Yeah, most likely. He told her the car was found and taken in by the cops." I shook my head. "It almost sounds believable." "Yes, and she did believe him," Belle chuckled, until she saw the picture and read about his arrest in the Sunday paper. Then she threw him out. "He deserves it," I said. "I agree." She giggled. He was yelling so loud that Mr. Jacobson came down the hall. "You've probably met him. He's in charge of sales." He told Irv to quiet down and go to his office. Next thing I knew, Irv was walking out with a box of his stuff. It wasn't just the newspaper story, it was his bad attitude. I heard them arguing. Mr. Jacobson had enough. "What about Jean? Did she get fired too?" "No, not as far as I know," she said, taking another sip of wine. "But before Irv left, he told her he was going to come after you. She told him you were tough and he'd better stay away, but who knows if he believed her." "I thought I'd warn you to be careful." "Thanks, Belle, I appreciate it. I'm not really worried about Irv, though. I'd love a chance to give him another black eye," I said with a smirk. "Just as long as he doesn't sneak up on you with a bat," she cautioned. At first, meeting with her didn't seem like a good idea, but I was starting to like her. Noticing she had no rings, I thought she might not need to rush home. I hated eating alone and wondered if she'd have dinner with me. "Maybe I should hire a bodyguard," I said, smiling. "How about you take the job for the next hour or so? If you watch my back, I'll buy dinner." She thought for a moment before replying. "That's probably not a good idea," she said, disappointing me. "I don't have anything against Jean. She made some bad choices, really bad ones, but I always got along with her. I should tell you that I'm seeing someone else seriously, and I don't want to send the wrong message." I nodded and said I understood. I wasn't looking for anything romantic, I just wanted some company. She looked at me for a moment. Then she asked with a small smile, "Promise you won't mope all night." "We can go to a restaurant that doesn't even serve beer," I replied, making her smile wider. We had a lovely time. I shared stories from my days working at the newspaper. She particularly enjoyed my story about trading jokes with the president. I also learned a lot about her. She had gone through a similar situation with her ex-husband 5 years ago. In her case, almost all her neighbors knew he was cheating, but never told her. She always wondered if she could have saved her marriage if someone had told her. I told her that's why I was so angry with Beverly. She was more Jean's friend than mine, but she still claimed to be my friend, too. When I took Belle back to her car, she shook my hand to say goodbye. I didn't get a kiss on the cheek, but that was fine. The last thing I wanted was another relationship. It would be a long time before I was ready for that. It was still early, and I really didn't want to go home. Everywhere I looked, I saw Jean. I didn't know what to do with myself until I drove by a theater showing the latest James Bond movie. No one makes you feel as good about being a man as Bond. The rest of the week was just as lonely. On Thursday and Friday nights, I went to Plato's place for a couple of drinks and played pool in the back room. I hadn't done that in years, and it showed. I lost more than $50 over the 2 nights. I kept putting off seeing the lawyer. I wasn't sure why. Divorce was inevitable, but it was so hard to go through with it. I decided it was silly to keep putting it off. I would call my attorney first thing Monday morning and start the process. I didn't want to blindside Jean, so I would have to call her during the weekend to let her know. I wasn't sure which would be harder, ending my marriage or telling Jean about it. I guess I would find out. First, I had something else to do. Saturday morning, I was in a good mood for the first time in a while. On Friday, I had picked up a framed photo of Judy from a framer I knew. Sometimes my corporate clients want big photos of their offices to hang in their lobbies. This guy frames pictures in his basement and charges less than shops. He had done a wonderful job on Judy's portrait. I wished I had a studio so I could hang it up on the wall. After leaving his place, I went to the drugstore for some wrapping paper and a card. I didn't have their phone number and couldn't remember their last name, so I decided to just drive over. I saw both cars in their driveway, so I took my gift to the door and rang the bell. I was a bit nervous about the husband. You never know how someone will react. But I had no reason to worry. His name was Carl, and he even got teary-eyed when Judy opened her present and he saw what it was. It was like I had given them $1 million. They couldn't stop thanking me. He invited me to stay for coffee, and since I never say no to coffee, I said yes. I didn't know them well. Jean knew them better. But they were really nice. Carl came from an artistic family. His father was a well-known watercolor artist. His sister ran an art gallery downtown, and Carl worked as a graphic artist. Judy made jewelry by hand and was very good at it. We had a lot to talk about, and before I knew it, the morning was over. But as I left to go back home, I was sure we would become friends. During the week, I got 42 orders for 8x10 photos from the 2 soccer teams I photographed the previous Saturday. After making some lunch, I spent the rest of the afternoon working on the prints. At $750 a photo, it was worth my time. Just as I finished, I got a call from Jack inviting me over for Sunday dinner again. It was turning into a busy weekend. The whole time, I knew I still had to make a call I didn't want to make. I waited until later that night. "Hello?" I recognized Jean's mother's voice. "Hello, Mom? Is Jean there? Oh, Dalton, I'm so glad you called. I've never seen Jean so sad. Can she come home?" No, that's not why I'm calling," I quickly said. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Please, Dalton, you have to forgive her. Please. I don't know what she'll do if you don't. She told us everything. She made a mistake and said she would never do it again. I believe her, but this situation is tough." Mom, I'm really sorry, I said. I'm not trying to be mean, but I don't see how we can fix this. I still love her, but it hurts to see her now. I don't think that feeling will go away. She was silent for almost a minute. I thought I heard her crying. This was hard for everyone. Jean is upstairs. She left her phone here. When I saw it was you calling, I hoped. She didn't finish her sentence. I'll go get her, she said. Hello, said the voice I loved for so many years. Hi, John. How are you? I said, feeling nervous. I could tell she was struggling. She knew this would be hard and was bracing herself. Are you calling with bad news? She asked, her voice shaky. I'm afraid so, Jean. I'm sorry. I love you so much and I always will, but we can't fix this. It hurts too much to see you and I can't live like that. On Monday, I'm going to file for divorce. It's best we move on with our lives, I said. She had tried to prepare herself for this. Okay, she said so quietly I almost didn't hear her. I won't fight it. I'm not getting a lawyer. Whatever you think is fair is fine. Dalton, I love you too. I will never forgive myself for hurting you, but I hope someday you will, she said, and then hung up. She didn't sound well, and I was really worried. I called the house phone to talk to her parents. This time her dad answered. I told him about our conversation. He said her mom was upstairs with her and promised to watch over her. He expressed his sadness too. He said he understood my decision and would do the same, but that didn't make it any less painful for everyone. I agreed. On Monday morning, I called my lawyer for an appointment, and she couldn't meet until Wednesday because of our schedules. John kept her promise. Her dad told me she signed the divorce papers without reading them. She couldn't keep up with the house payments, so I bought her half. John took the money and planned to move into an apartment when she was ready. Even though I made almost 10 times more money than she did, Jean still refused any support the judge wanted to give her. From that point on, we just had to wait 6 months for the final decision. The next 3 months were quiet. Then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, so I answered it in my business voice. Dalton Conrad, I said. Hi, Dalton, this is Judy Anderson. How are you? She asked in a friendly voice. Hearing her, I felt a bit guilty. I had planned to invite them over for a backyard cookout, but never got around to it. Hi, Judy, I'm fine. How are you, Carl and little Stephen? Everyone is doing good, she replied. Listen, Carl's sister was over last month. She owns the gallery on State Street. Her name is Tracy. Yeah, you mentioned her when I dropped off the photo print. Did you hang it up? I asked, not meaning to cut her off. We sure did. It's on the back wall of our living room. We love it, she said. I was a bit surprised. I remembered her as being shy at the park, and while the photo wasn't inappropriate, it did show a lot of her left boob and part of her right. I thought they'd hang it in their bedroom or the baby's room. That's why I'm calling, said Judy. When Tracy saw it, she went wild. She loves how you captured the innocence of the scene. She even suggested we name it Essence of Innocence. Wow, I said. I like that. Yeah, we do too. Carl is going to get a little brass plaque with that name and put it under the picture. But there's something else I wanted to ask. Tracy called and wants to display it in her gallery for a while. She'd give you credit, of course. I know this isn't your usual style, so I said I'd check with you first. Judy, the photo is yours. It's a gift. You can do anything you want with it. But to answer your question, I have no objections. I'm honored, I told her. Oh, Dalton, thank you. I hoped you'd say that. We've received so many compliments on that picture. Carl and I will cherish it forever, she said, her voice full of excitement. Until that call, my days and nights were just blending together with nothing much happening. There's that saying, there's no joy in Mudville. Well, there was no joy in Daltonville either, at least not since my split with my wife. Except for that call. As an industrial photographer, I don't get much praise, just money. It was really nice to hear someone appreciate my work. Another month passed and things didn't get any easier. In fact, they got harder. Coming home to an empty house was becoming a regular thing, and I hated it more each day. I kept thinking maybe I'll feel better once this is all over, once I can start fresh. But for now, my life felt stuck in a waiting phase. The closer it got to the end of my marriage, the more I found myself at the bar in Plato's Place after work. Friends said time would help, and I guess they were right. But what should I do in the meantime? One night at Plato's Place, something exciting happened, although it was short-lived. I was talking to Pete, my favorite bartender, when a man I didn't know came in and sat a few stools away. He seemed friendly, so we started chatting. Eventually, I had to excuse myself to use the restroom. When I came back, I saw Pete talking with Big John, the bouncer, who had just started his shift. They seemed deep in conversation, but John motioned for me to come over. "Hi, John," I said, feeling that something might be up. "Hey," Pete said, nodding towards the man I just met. "That guy over there." "Yeah," I replied, curious. "When I turned my back, he slipped something into your drink," Pete told me. "Are you sure?" I asked in disbelief. "Positive," Pete said, pointing to one of the mirrors behind the bar. I saw it in the reflection. I don't know that guy at all. Why would he put something in my drink? I wondered aloud. "That's the big question," whispered Big John. "Pete and I were figuring out what to do. We can call the cops or deal with him ourselves." He waited for my response, so I gave it. "Let's find out why he did it. I say we take him to the restroom and persuade him to talk." "Okay, let's do it," said Pete. The stranger noticed us walking towards him and tried to run, but Big John grabbed him before he got far. We pulled him into the restroom to have a talk. At first, he denied everything. Then Big John cracked his knuckles, and the guy quickly confessed. He said the drug was phenobarbital. When mixed with alcohol, it makes a person feel dizzy and sleepy, making them appear very drunk. My new friend was supposed to keep an eye on me. When I started to act strange, he would lead me to my car where my old friend Irv Peterson was waiting. Irv wanted revenge on me. Together, they would have had me in a bad spot. "What do you want to do, Dalton? Call the cops," Pete asked. I sighed. The problem is Peterson will deny everything. It's his word against ours. Nothing will happen. And I'll always have to watch my back. "No, I want to end this now," I said firmly. We didn't know if the guy we caught was a friend of Peterson or just someone he hired, but none of us trusted him. So Big John handcuffed him to one of the stalls. We planned to hand him and Peterson over to the cops if things went well. It was decided that I would go out to the parking lot alone and hope Peterson would still try something. I acted like I was feeling sick. I leaned against the door frame and then against a few cars on my way. I didn't see Peterson and thought he got scared, but I kept pretending and fumbled with my car keys at the door lock. Finally, I saw someone coming in my car's side window. I turned around but kept acting weak. He stopped about 5 feet from me with a small knife. I saw Dalton his eyes as he watched me act dizzy. He grinned and took a step closer. That put him within my reach. I quickly moved my left foot forward and kicked hard with my right, hitting his shin. He reacted as expected. The knife dropped and he grabbed his leg, falling forward. I knelt down and put my knee on his chest, hitting him in the face 4 times. He was almost out, but this guy had messed up my life. I stood and pulled him up by his shirt, then punched him in the stomach. He groaned and bent over. I straightened him up and punched his jaw. He fell back against my car and slid to the ground. Big John watched from the corner in case something went wrong. He called the cops on his cell phone before pulling me away from the guy. Once again, my good relationship with the police helped me. I knew 3 of the 6 cops on a first-name basis. With Big John as a witness, they arrested Peterson for assault with a weapon. That was no small crime. This time, Irv wouldn't walk free easily. He'd have to pay bail to get out, and if he couldn't, he would stay in jail until his trial. The only thing that took away from my joy about his trouble was thinking about his wife and kids. They didn't deserve this. After giving my statement at the police station, I went home. My hand was hurting a lot and really swollen. I wasn't sure if I could hold my camera for a while. The next day was Saturday. Summer was over and it got very cold overnight. I didn't feel like doing anything, so I did exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't feel like doing anything, so I did exactly that, nothing. But I don't usually like feeling sorry for myself for more than one day. So on Sunday, I took a shower, went to Denny's for breakfast, and then headed downtown to find something to do. I thought I might end up at Lincoln Park Zoo, but I was open to other ideas. While getting off the expressway, I remembered the art gallery run by Carl's sister. I wondered if they had my photo displayed. I didn't know the exact address, but I knew it was downtown on State Street. It couldn't be too hard to find. I just hoped it was open on a Sunday. It turned out it was easy to find, and it was open. The gallery was big and filled with impressive art. In the middle of the room was an easel holding my photo of Judy. I wanted to hear what people thought about it, so I joined a couple of people standing nearby. But they moved away when I walked up. I was about to look at some watercolors when I heard a woman's voice behind me. "It's an amazing photograph, isn't it?" I turned around and almost gasped. In front of me stood a beautiful woman with golden hair, striking blue eyes, and a smile that could melt ice. Her words barely registered in my mind because I was so taken aback by her beauty. I managed to say, "Huh?" "The photograph," she repeated. "It's my sister-in-law. I think it's amazing." Her sister-in-law? So she was Carl's sister? I pulled myself together and tried to speak clearly. "Yes, I agree," I said, wanting to keep the conversation going. "You can't be in the arts without learning some art talk." I looked at the photo, pretending to think deeply. The subject has such a fresh, innocent look. I love how the photographer used the early morning sun to highlight her hair, and see how the light shines through her blouse? It makes the fabric look see-through and gives the picture a warm, glowing light. I noticed it was taken with a long lens, probably a 300 mm. The blurry background and darkened corners guided the viewer's eyes to the main part of the photo. She seemed surprised by my comment. "Wow, you must be a photographer, an artist, or a critic," she said, stretching out her hand. "I'm Tracy. Nice to meet you," I said, shaking her hand gently. "I'm Dalton Conrad." She furrowed her brow for a second, trying to place my name. "Dalton, that sounds—" "You're the photographer," she realized suddenly. "No wonder you knew so much about the photo," she laughed. "Guilty is charged," I said, laughing with her. She noticed my swollen hand and, still holding it, turned it to look closer. "Yeah, I had a small accident the other night. It's better now," I explained. We started talking, and I mentioned I wanted to check out some watercolor paintings. She gave me a personal tour, sharing stories about different artists and who she thought would become famous. We ended up in front of the watercolors I wanted to see. It turned out her father painted them. Wow, Carl told me his dad was an artist, but I had no idea. I let my words trail off. "Does he still paint?" I asked. "No, he got Parkinson's disease a few years ago." "It ended his career," she said sadly. "I'm so sorry to hear that. He's really talented." "It's a shame he can't create more," I said. I looked at both paintings, trying to decide which one to buy. They were both beautiful, and the thought of having one on my wall at home made me happy. Finally, I picked one. "I'll take this one," I told Tracy. "Really?" she replied, sounding a bit surprised. "I didn't know you were interested in buying." I smiled. "To be honest, I just came in to see if you still had my photo. But these paintings caught my eye right away. I knew I wouldn't leave without one." She carefully packed it up for me, and I felt really good for the first time in a while. It was funny. Every time I looked at the painting, I could see Tracy's lovely face in my mind. I was in a good mood for several days. But of course, good things don't last forever. When I saw my phone ringing, I noticed it was Jean calling. "Hello," I said without much emotion. "Dalton, it's me. I just heard what happened. Are you okay?" At first, I thought she meant me buying the painting, but then I understood. "You mean about your boyfriend attacking me with a knife? Yeah, I'm fine." "A knife?" she cried out. "Oh my God, I only heard he attacked you, not about the knife." Well, to be honest, it wasn't much of a knife. I think he grabbed it because his friend wasn't around. There were supposed to be two of them, but we had his buddy handcuffed in the bathroom until the cops came. I heard her starting to cry. "I'm so sorry, Dalton. This is all my fault," she sobbed. A few months ago, hearing Jean cry would have really hurt me. Now, it didn't affect me the same way. I knew she didn't want a lecture, but I didn't care. She was going to get one. "Actions have consequences, Jean, because you couldn't talk to your own husband about your problems and chose some jerk instead. 2 families are ruined. Not only have you and I lost each other, but there's also a single mother who has to tell her 2 teenage sons their father is going to prison. Have you apologized to her? You should." I heard her crying harder. "If you marry again, Jean, I hope you've learned your lesson," I said before hanging up. That was the end of my 3-day good mood. A couple of days later, my mood lifted again when I got a call from Belle. I hadn't talked to her since we had dinner a few months ago. She was nice, maybe not my type, but pleasant to talk to. She asked if I wanted to have a drink after work, and I accepted with a smile. This time I got there first and already had a beer when she walked in. "Hi, Belle." I greeted her, standing up as she slid into the booth across from me. One thing I learned about Belle from our last meeting is that she doesn't do small talk. She gets straight to the point. "What did you say to Jean the other day?" She was still crying the next morning she started. I had to think back. She kept saying sorry to me. I told her she should say sorry to Irv's wife and kids. Belle leaned back about to say something when the waitress interrupted us. She ordered a white wine and waited for the girl to leave before tearing into me again. "Damn it, Dalton. I know she messed up big time, but she's very delicate right now. If you yell at her like that again, you might just break her," she said. "Belle, I'm not trying to break anyone." "Well, maybe Irv, but that's it. She has to own up to what she did," I replied. "She is, Dalton. I'll bet you don't even know what she told the DA, do you?" "The DA? No, I haven't heard from him yet, and you won't. When he decided to charge her, they did? I didn't know that. The cops said it was unlikely." "How come I wasn't told?" I asked, feeling frustrated. "Because it didn't get that far. Jean got a public defender. He told her to plead not guilty. Said no judge would convict her for adultery, but Jean went to the DA and pled guilty. The judge gave her 200 hours of community service." "Belle, how do you know all this?" I had to ask. "My fiancé is a Cook County cop. He works in the DA's office," she said. I glanced at her left hand and noticed the ring for the first time. I knew she didn't have it last time we saw each other. "I'm sorry for not noticing, Belle. Congratulations," I said. She raised her hand to show off the ring. "Thank you," she said with a big smile. "I know most of those guys." "What's the lucky guy's name?" I asked. "Dave Quinn." "Dave?" I said, surprised. "I've known Dave for years." "I know. As soon as he saw your last name on the arrest report, he knew it was you. But he didn't know I worked with your wife until he told me one of his friends was having marital troubles. We put 2 and 2 together." She took a sip of wine. "Anyway, my point is Jean could have gotten away with it, but she took responsibility like you said. She's trying to make up for it." I didn't say anything. I just sat there staring at my glass, letting her words sink in. "She still loves you, you know." I nodded. "Yeah, I know. And to some extent, I still love her, but we can't be a couple again. The wounds are too deep," I said. "I know," she said with a sigh. "And so does Jean. She's accepted it, but that doesn't mean you need to keep hurting her, Dalton. She cried so much after you hung up on her the other day. We all went into her office to calm her down. Even Beverly tried to help. She was so upset we knew she shouldn't drive. Mr. Jacobson told me to take her home. Dalton, she's a mess. When I brought her home, I helped her mother put her to bed. Then I sat and talked with her mom and dad for a bit. She was going to call you on Monday about the fight, but her parents talked her out of it. They were worried about what you might say, but she called you the next day anyway. All right, I won't be so hard on her if we talk again. I promised." She seemed happy with my promise. She leaned back in her seat and looked at me with a small smile. "Now," she said playfully, "they said they knew." I was glad to hear they had planned a week off work for her. They were taking her to visit friends in Fort Lauderdale. Jean loved the ocean and the beach. Maybe this trip would help her start fresh. As I left, I thought about doing the same thing. Just book a trip and go somewhere. But I had a busy schedule for the next few months. I couldn't find the time. The day our divorce was final, I worked really hard to keep my mind off it. After work, Jack and some other friends took me out to a club. The next thing I knew, I woke up on Jack's couch with his kids playing around me. They were pretending to be cowboys and Indians, and I was the Indian. The next month, I got a notice to go to court as a witness. It was for the case, the state of Illinois versus Peterson. The trial took only 3 days. Dave was right. It was an easy win for the district attorney. Irv got 3 to 5 years in a medium security prison in Danville. It was over. I could close that chapter of my life and move on. But how? I decided a vacation was a good idea. I looked at my schedule again. Besides my own bookings, an agency also set up jobs for me. They took 20% of what they found. My calendar was full till September. Oh well, better late than never. It would give me something to look forward to. I blocked out a week and told the agency to do the same. Now I just needed to decide where to go. I had time to think about it. Life became dull after that. I'd have a drink with a friend now and then, but mostly it was wake up, go to work, come home, and go to bed. I didn't have much of a social life. The thought of dating again scared me. As usual in Chicago, spring weather was crazy. One day it was 45 degrees. The next it was 82. Suddenly summer was here. I realized Memorial Day was just 2 weeks away and I had no plans. I usually had a backyard party with friends and family, but Jean used to organize it. My heart ached a bit as I thought of her for the first time in a while. Was she as lonely as I was? I guess my friends thought I wasn't having a party. By the end of the week, I had 3 invites for Memorial Weekend gatherings. Jack was having a small cookout on Sunday, which was good because I could also go to Carl and Judy Anderson's BBQ on Monday. I hoped Tracy would be there. When I arrived, I saw a few neighbors but didn't see Tracy. I walked around with a beer in my hand talking to a few people from the neighborhood, but I felt out of place since everyone else had a partner. Finally, with nothing else to do, I offered to be the grill master. That would have been my job if it were to be a good place. I was going to be the grill master for my own party. Carl agreed quickly, so I started handing out burgers and hot dogs on warm buns to everyone. I was flipping a new batch of burgers when something landed on my ear. I shook my head and swatted at it, but it came right back. I hit my ear again, still trying to get rid of it. I was about to slap myself silly when I heard some laughter behind me. Suddenly, my day got a lot better as I turned around to see Tracy with a big smile and a feather, probably from the ground. I was just a little bit more aware of her. She said playfully, "Having some trouble?" A few people around us were laughing, but I didn't care. My heart raced just being near her again. I said I have as light as a feather, I said, trying to sound smart. "Ah," she said, looking at the grill. "You should probably turn those burgers before they turn black." "Oh, yeah," I said, blushing a bit as I turned them. "So how do you like yours done?" "I'm not picky." "Any of those will do," she replied. I picked the biggest one, put it on a warm bun, and handed it to her. She thanked me and walked off to find a place to sit. I told Carl I needed a break, grabbed a burger for myself, and went to find Tracy. "Can I join you?" I asked. "Please do," she said, patting the blanket on the ground next to her. "I hope you didn't mind me having a little fun with you. I had to get you back for teasing me at the gallery." I laughed and said it was fine. It was the first time I had laughed in months. As the day went on, that laugh turned into many more. I was having such a good time, and I think Tracy was too. We just seemed to get along easily. We talked about art, photography, dancing, movies, and things we still wanted to do. One of her future plans was to visit Monterey Peninsula in Northern California. She had been there as a child with her dad and remembered it as being very beautiful. She wanted to go back someday. I felt sad when the sun started to set. I wanted the day to last forever. As night came and people started to leave, I knew we would have to say goodbye soon. Should I ask for her number or just visit her again at the gallery? I hated making decisions these days. I hadn't asked a woman out in years. Do guys still ask for phone numbers, or is that too old-fashioned now? She was getting ready to leave, and I was stuck, stumbling over my words. She must have noticed because she decided to help me out. She pulled out a pen and one of her business cards from her purse. "This is my cell," she said, writing her number on the back of the card. "I had a great time today. Call me if you want to hang out sometime." She handed me the card and said she'd say goodbye to a few more people before leaving. I did the same, said goodbye to the few people I knew, and thanked my hosts for inviting me. When I shook hands with Carl, he leaned in close. "She showed interest in you." "That's rare for her," he whispered. "Go for it." I smiled and thanked him. Tracy and I met one last time as we were about to leave. I walked her to her car. I wanted to kiss her but was too scared. She seemed to know what I was thinking and gave me a friendly peck on the cheek. "Call me," she said as she backed out of the driveway. I walked the 4 blocks home, but it felt like my feet never touched the ground. The next day, while I was in the middle of my work, I got a call from Jack. "Hey, got time for a drink tonight?" "Sure, Jack, I have plenty of time these days. I'll leave. I'm going to take you to the hospital. I'm going to take you to my room. I'm going to have a drink. I'm going to take you to the room. I'm going to go to the room. I'm going to take you 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 to the room. Days, I replied. He was at the bar when I walked in. "Hi, Pete," I greeted my favorite bartender. "Miller Lite, please." "Coming right up," he said. "So how's everything going? How's your love life?" Jack asked. "Not much happening right now," I said. "Man, you need to get back out there, Dalton. Staying home alone every night is not a good idea. You're a good-looking, successful guy with a great personality. Use it. What about the girl from the gallery you were telling me about?" He saw the smile on my face. "Ah, so there is something there. Have you seen her since that day at the gallery?" "Actually, yes. I saw her yesterday. Her brother invited me to a BBQ and she was there." She's amazing. We talked all day and had lots to say. I told him. Have you asked her out yet? No, not yet. I want to, but I don't know. After what happened with Jean, maybe it's still too soon to start dating. That's nonsense, Jack said with conviction. Look, I've never been through what you went through, but it must have really hurt your confidence. That's normal. It just means you have to get back up and try again. I didn't say anything. I let Jack's words sink in. If only it were that easy, I thought. Does she like Shakespeare? Jack asked. Shakespeare? I don't know. We didn't talk about that. Why? Well, you like Shakespeare. I know you do. Yeah, I love it. What are you getting at? I asked. Jack pulled 4 tickets from his shirt pocket. They were for the play Julius Caesar at the Shakespeare Theater that Friday. An entertainment writer gave these to me. I'm not really into it, but my wife Lynette likes it. I know you like this stuff too. Why don't you call the girl from the gallery and see if she'd like to go? We can go together. My mind started racing. It sounded perfect. But what if she said no? Carl said she was interested, and she did tell me to call her. Should I take the chance? I looked at the tickets and then at Jack. He had a big grin on his face like he was daring me to go through with it. All right, I was going to do it. I had already saved Tracy's number and the gallery's number in my phone. I took out my phone and dialed. Hello, she said, sounding cheerful through the phone. Suddenly I got nervous again. Hi, it's me, Dalton. Dalton Conrad, I stammered. Hi, Dalton. Wow, that was quick. Quick to call, she said, sounding pleased. That was a good sign. I took a deep breath. Well, there's something we didn't talk about yesterday, and I was wondering if you like Shakespearean plays. Are you kidding? I love Shakespeare, she said. Jack must have heard her because he grinned even larger. My heart started to race. I took another deep breath. Well, a friend of mine has 4 tickets to Julius Caesar this Friday night at the Shakespeare Theater at Navy Pier. It would be you, me, my friend, and his wife. Would you like to go? I asked, now holding my breath. If she says no, I'm going to be so embarrassed, I thought. That sounds like fun. I'd love to, she replied. I expected her to change her mind, but she didn't. I smiled and nodded to Jack, showing she had said yes. Fantastic, I said, maybe a bit too excitedly. It starts at 8. Wait, said Jack, poking me to get my attention. Hold on a second, Tracy, I said, looking at Jack to see what he wanted. What about dinner before the play? Can she be ready at 6? We can go to the Little General and have a nice time, he suggested. Great idea, I thought. Tracy, can you be ready at 6? Sure, we can have dinner before the play, she said with a happy tone. What should I wear? I told her to dress nicely, but an evening gown wasn't needed. This was my first real date in many years. To say I was nervous would be putting it lightly. I was grateful that Jack offered to drive because I might have ended up driving onto someone's lawn otherwise. Jack stopped the car in front of Tracy's building and I got out to ring the bell. What happened next felt like a dream. Tracy came out looking amazing. Her silky blonde hair fell over her shoulders, framing her sparkling blue eyes. Her short, off-the-shoulder blue dress showed just the right amount of skin and fit her perfectly. She left me speechless. Tracy, you look stunning, I said. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek. Thank you, Dalton. I'm glad you called. I'm excited about tonight, she replied. Jack and Lynette got out of the car to meet Tracy. As we were getting back into the car, I heard Lynette quietly tell Jack, "Put your eyes back in your head," giving him a light slap on the arm. Dinner was wonderful. We laughed a lot and had great conversations. Tracy was so kind that by the time we finished our meals, it felt like we had all been friends for a long time. I could tell Jack and Lynette liked her too. The evening started out warm, but it quickly got cold, as often happens by Chicago's lakefront. During the play, the wind shifted and it got much colder. This was the perfect chance to show I was a gentleman. I took off my jacket and placed it around Tracy's shoulders, then put my arm around her. She snuggled into me and we watched the rest of the play, keeping each other warm. I felt like I was in heaven. As the evening was ending, it seemed like Tracy didn't want it to be over any more than I did. It was a bit after midnight when we got her home. She thanked Jack and Lynette in the car, and then I walked her to her door. "Thank you, Dalton. I had a really great time tonight," she said with a smile. "Can I call you again?" I asked. "I'll be upset if you don't," she replied. It had been a long time since my last date, and I felt a bit self-conscious knowing people could be watching, but I had wanted to kiss her all night and decided to go for it. As I leaned in, my nervousness must have been clear. Tracy didn't wait. She put her hand behind my head and pulled me into a passionate kiss. We shared a warm moment as she leaned into me. My face turned bright red when I realized she could feel my excitement. After the kiss, I promised to call her the next day, then started heading back to my car. "Dalton!" she called out. I turned around. "Don't forget this," she said, taking my sport coat off her shoulders. "Oh yeah, thanks," I said, taking it from her hand. "You might need it," she said with a knowing smile and a wink. People would think she meant because it was cold, but I knew she meant it would hide my excitement. Wow, what a night! If I felt great after the party, I was on cloud 9 after Friday night. We went on 6 more dates over the next month. We didn't rush things. We were getting to know each other. After another Friday night date, we went back to her apartment. She told me she wanted me to pick her up at the gallery at 5 o'clock the next day. She said not to make plans for that night, but wouldn't tell me why. I didn't argue. I arrived at 5 sharp. She was locking the door when I showed up. She invited me in and said she had to do a few things in the back and asked if I could wait a minute. I walked around looking at the paintings and was sad to see someone had bought another painting by her father that I liked. I was thinking of buying it myself. "Dalton, can you come back here and help me, please?" I heard her call from the back room. "Coming?" I responded. "Surprise!" everyone shouted as I walked through the door. I was stunned. Most of my friends were there, plus Carl and Judy and a few people I didn't know. "What's going on?" I stammered. Tracy walked up to me with a big smile and hugged me. "Happy birthday, Dalton," she said before kissing me deeply. It took a moment to remember my birthday was the following Monday. "How did you know?" I asked. "I Googled you, honey. You'd be surprised how much info there is on you," she replied. "I called Jack and he invited your friends for me. This was too much. Jean had a couple of small parties for me when we were married, but never a surprise party. Never anything like this. I also noticed she called me honey for the first time. I was speechless. Most people just had cards, but some even brought gifts. I opened them and thanked everyone. Tracy kept hers hidden until the end. It was clear it was a painting, but I didn't realize which one until I unwrapped it. It was the other painting by her father that I wanted. I had to work hard not to cry. I was so moved. The party could have gone on all night, but we wanted to make sure everyone was safe to drive, so Tracy ended it at 8 o'clock. I helped clean up after everyone left. As we were finishing, Tracy had another surprise for me. "Dalton, I thought I'd go home with you and help you hang that," she said, pointing to the painting. "Angie is opening up the shop in the morning, so I have all night," she said with a twinkle in her eye. Angie was her assistant. Wow. It was really going to happen. It had been a few months since I walked into the gallery and met Tracy for the first time. I remember my heart skipping a beat, but I didn't think it would lead to anything serious. Little did I know she would make me so happy. When we got to my place, we did hang the painting. It looked good on the wall next to the other one. But then, I started to feel nervous again. I asked Tracy if she wanted something to drink, hoping she wouldn't see that I was stalling. Tracy looked at me, trying to read my face. "You're not ready yet, are you?" I wasn't sure what she meant. "I'm sorry. Judy told me about your divorce. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It must have been really tough. I know how hard it can be. I found out my fiancé was cheating on me a month before our wedding. It was devastating. I've wanted you since you walked into the gallery, but I wanted to wait until I thought you were ready for a commitment. Maybe I was wrong." I was surprised. I didn't know Judy or anyone else knew about my divorce. I know it hasn't been that long since it happened, if you feel uncomfortable with me being here. She let her words hang in the air, waiting for me to say something. I was still shocked that she knew about John. "You should probably take me home," she said. No, please stay. I'm sorry if I seem nervous. It's just... You're the first woman in this house since she left. I guess I'm just a little anxious." She looked at me, thinking about what to do. Then she finally smiled. "Didn't you mention getting me a drink?" "Absolutely," I said, trying to shake off my funk. "What would you like?" "A glass of cold water would be great," she said. "Cold water coming up. Here," I said, pointing to the couch. "Have a seat where you can look at your dad's paintings, and I'll be right back." I went into the kitchen, silently kicking myself. What was I doing? Why were these fears coming back now? I took a deep breath and filled a glass with cold water from the fridge. One more deep breath to gather my courage. "Here you go," I said, handing her the glass. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. "I'm a good listener. No, I appreciate the offer, but I'd rather talk about you. We always had so much to discuss on our dates, but she never talked much about herself. Personal things, I mean. She shared a little about her childhood and how much she admired her father's talent. He gave her the money to start the gallery, but she was the one who made it successful. "I looked up to him," she said. "I still do. His talent, his love for beauty. It breaks my heart to see him like this. He used to be so happy, always smiling and joking. Now he's in a wheelchair. His hands don't work well enough to hug me anymore." I saw her trying not to cry. "I'm so sorry," I said. "You rarely talk about your parents. I didn't want to push because it makes you sad. Is your mother still around?" Tracy nodded. "Yes, she still takes care of Dad. She won't put him in a home. It's hard for her, but she says he'll always be her husband and she won't leave him." One tear escaped down her cheek. She wiped it away. To my surprise, she went on. She talked about her 2 long relationships. The first was a guy she met in her second year of college. They were together for 2 years but drifted apart after graduation. The other was the man she was engaged to. He was a real estate expert who quickly made big money. She fell for him hard, and after 3 years of dating, he asked her to marry him. She said she almost felt shy wearing the engagement ring because it was so big. It was the happiest time of her life. Then she found out he had been cheating on her with his secretary for a year. She was heartbroken. That was 4 years ago. Even now she was holding back tears as she talked about it. Because of that, she had been very careful not to get too close to anyone since. "So now you know my life story," she said. "Sad but true. If you want to leave, now's the time." I was having doubts. Less than a year ago, when I filed for divorce, I told myself I wouldn't open my heart to anyone for a long time. But there I was, drawn in by this amazing, strong, confident woman. For the last 4 years, she had protected herself from being hurt again. Now she was letting me in, trusting me with her feelings. Could I do the same for her? "I'm not going anywhere," I said. She smiled, leaned in closer, and gave me a soft kiss on the lips. "I have a confession," she said after we kissed. "I think I fell a little in love with you before we even met." I must have looked confused. She smiled more and said, "It happened the first time I saw your portrait of Judy. One look at the photographer and I could tell he was kind, caring, and had the soul of a poet. Now that I know you better, I see I was right. But you also have a hidden strength I respect, a strength that helped you get through hard times with bravery and resolve." "Wow," I said modestly. "You make me sound like a superhero." "Maybe you are," she joked while gently touching the inside of my thigh, stopping just before she reached my pants. Looking into my eyes, she asked, "Are you a man of steel with a mischievous look?" "Well, there is one part of me that might be," I replied with a similar grin. She kissed me, our tongues dancing together. "I just hope you're not faster than a speeding bullet," she laughed as she started undoing the first button of my shirt. "I've wanted to do this since you first walked into the gallery." We continued kissing as she undid each button one at a time. I closed my eyes, absorbed in the moment when I felt her hand gently rub my chest. Nice chest," she whispered. I wondered if she could feel how fast my heart was beating. "Take me to bed, Dalton," she whispered softly. "I want to be with you." We lay together, catching our breath. Tracy spoke first, still breathing hard. "Wow," she said. "Happy birthday, Mr. Kent, or can I call you Clark?" We both giggled. We were too tired to laugh. "Miss Anderson, you can call me anything you want," I replied, finally able to speak. She stayed the night. It was amazing to wake up with her in my arms. Tracy was wonderful. The next morning I got up first. I quietly put on my robe and tiptoed downstairs to the kitchen. My plan was to make her breakfast in bed, but she came in while I was still scrambling the eggs. I saw her out of the corner of my eye and turned. She was leaning against the doorframe, wearing a smile in one of my shirts. She looked amazing. "I hope you don't mind." "I didn't bring a robe," she said, making the kitchen feel warmer. "No man on this planet or any other would mind seeing you like that," I stammered. I heard her bare feet on the floor as she walked behind me. I grinned as she put her arms around my chest and rested her head against my back. It had been so long since I felt this kind of affection. We finished breakfast and then went back upstairs. We shared more intimate moments. When we were finally tired, we showered together and realized we weren't as tired as we thought. We finally stopped just as we ran out of hot water. It was 2:30 in the afternoon before we got dressed for the first time all day. We went out to eat, then headed back to my place. I hated to see the day coming to an end because I knew I'd have to take Tracy home soon. My heart started hurting just thinking about it. The western sky started to glow with soft colors when I asked if she had time to sit with me on the porch and watch the sunset before leaving. She cuddled up next to me and laid her head on my shoulder. I put my arm around her. For the first few minutes, we sat in silence, watching the blues, yellows, and oranges blend together in a beautiful light show. I didn't know it then, but we were both lost in our own thoughts. I knew I was falling in love with her. I wanted to tell her, but she spoke first. "Dalton, did you really mean it yesterday when you said I was amazing?" "Absolutely, Tracy. You're an incredible person. Since she started, I decided to be honest. I know we've only known each other for a few months, but yes," she asked, looking into my face. "Well, I'm falling in love with you, Tracy." She kept staring at me, not frowning, not smiling, just staring. "What if something about me wasn't so amazing to you?" she finally said. "What if I had a secret that you didn't like?" Her face suddenly looked serious and almost scared. I guess I looked surprised. What was she talking about? She didn't wait for me to ask. "Dalton, I'm falling in love with you too, but I do have a secret, and I'm scared it might end our relationship before it starts. But I also know a relationship can't be built on lies." I could see her starting to tear up. I wiped one away from the corner of her eye with my thumb. I couldn't imagine her having a secret so bad that it would change how I felt about her. I gave her a reassuring smile and kissed her gently. "Whatever this deep secret is, honey," I said, "I'm sure I can handle it." She looked scared, but spoke again, carefully. "Well, in my business world, I'm always the one in charge, but sometimes," she paused and looked at me for a few seconds. "Oh, well, I'm just going to say it and pray you don't think badly of me. I like to be tied up. In bed, not all the time, but sometimes I like to be tied up and feel helpless. I want my partner to take control and do what he wants," she said suddenly, and then stopped waiting to see how I would react. I was shocked. After all that buildup, I didn't expect this. She was scared, just like my ex-wife. But Tracy had the courage to tell me. I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but I couldn't help it. I laughed. Tracy looked upset. She thought I was laughing at her. I quickly hugged her and told her I wasn't. I then explained how my ex-wife, Jean, was too scared to talk to me about her fantasies and ended up with someone else. I told Tracy that I admired her for being brave enough to share her secret. I said it showed how much she trusted me, and that meant a lot. If Jean had trusted me like that, we might still be married. I've never done anything like that before, but if you don't mind teaching a beginner, I'd like to try it, I said. Tracy smiled, lighting up my heart. I hated the thought of waking up alone after being with her, but she had things to do before opening her gallery the next day. I also had to get an early start. When you work for yourself, there are no paid holidays. If I didn't work, I didn't earn any money. After dropping Tracy off, I went home and turned on my laptop. I looked up some sites about bondage. I was not into porn. I didn't see sex as something to watch. It was something to do. So I wasn't surprised when the pictures didn't excite me. Instead, I found myself criticizing the photos, poor lighting, boring composition, bad colors. If there's so much money in this stuff, why can't they hire a real photographer? I found hundreds of sites and started reading stories about bondage. Some of it seemed too extreme, and I hoped Tracy didn't want to go that far, but some things looked fun, and I even got a bit excited thinking about it. This might not be so bad, I thought. I wouldn't see Tracy again until midweek, so every night I read more about bondage techniques. I swear, I don't think I'd ever seen anyone look so excited so quickly, except maybe me if I couldn't control myself. This felt completely new to me. I couldn't even explain it, but I felt so much excitement that I was afraid it would be obvious. My pants were tight, and my observant partner noticed she had pulled her underwear up but hadn't put her dress back on yet. "Sir, may I help you with this?" she asked, lightly touching the outside of my zipper. I almost lost control right then. I hadn't planned on doing anything until after we went out to eat, but I didn't expect to feel this excited. I didn't think I'd make it to the car without it being obvious. She was on her knees before I even realized I had given in. I couldn't remember feeling such strong feelings so fast since I was a teenager. I felt weak as Tracy noticed every reaction I had. She stayed in front of me and made sure I was comfortable. I was a little shaky as I stood, trying to catch my breath when Tracy, still on her knees in front of me and dressed only in her underwear, gently cleaned me up. When she finished, my kind partner hugged me around the waist and pressed her head against my stomach. "Thank you, Dalton," she said quietly. "You have no idea what this means to me." I had to sit down and rest for a bit while she put her dress back on and fixed her makeup. We went out to a small Italian restaurant I'd heard about. The host showed us to our table and pulled the chair out for Tracy. I heard a slight gasp as she sat down and guessed she might have felt a little uncomfortable. She looked over at me with a look of strong emotion, and I gave her a knowing smile. She was a little quiet as we ate, and I began to wonder if she was enjoying herself. Just when I was about to ask, she gave me a big smile. "I'm not sure I can wait till we get home," she said with a playful smile. "I might just have to surprise you before we leave." I guess that answered my question. Well, she was able to wait until we got back, but as soon as we walked through the door, she turned and kissed me passionately. "I hope you're planning on staying the night because there's no way I'm letting you leave tonight," she said firmly. I hadn't really thought about staying the night, but why not? We tried a few more fun games, and then I showed her how much I loved her. We stayed up until the sun was actually starting to rise before we fell asleep in each other's arms. We only slept for about 3 hours, but those were good hours of sleep. The next morning, we both felt bright and happy. That night was truly the beginning of us. From then on, we were a couple. We spent every free moment together. Sometimes we played games with rolls and ties. Other times, we simply enjoyed each other's company. Before we knew it, summer was ending. I looked at my calendar and saw that I had no plans for the first week of September. I had forgotten all about my vacation plans. When I mentioned it to Tracy, her eyes lit up. "Let's go on vacation together," she said. I hadn't thought about it because I didn't think she would want to close her art gallery. "I've been training Angie. She can run the gallery for a week." "What do you think?" Tracy asked, getting excited. "Where should we go?" I asked. "Monare," she said. I had seen pictures of the coast, and the idea got me thinking. "If we go, would you mind if I bring one of my cameras and take some pictures?" I asked. "Mind? Are you kidding? That's the whole point. Think of what you could do with scenery like that," she replied. The next day, I booked our flight to Oakland and rented a car. A couple of weeks later, Tracy gave Angie some final instructions, and we were on our way. By the time we got there, it was late. We had dinner and then went to bed. The next morning, we started our drive south on Pacific Coast Highway. The views of the California coast quickly grabbed our attention. As soon as I found a place to park, I grabbed my camera and an extra battery. Tracy and I walked down to the sea. I felt like a kid in a candy store. Every time I looked through the camera, I saw another amazing shot. Tracy and I spent the whole day taking photos of the Monterey Peninsula. When the sun went down and it got dark, we realized we had not even eaten lunch. We found a motel, checked in, showered, and were very hungry by the time we got to the restaurant. We were still excited about all the photos we had taken. The next day, we packed a lunch before heading out again. I convinced Tracy to wear her bikini for some photos. We found a quiet, hidden spot by the coast with no one around. I promised her the photos would be just for me before she agreed to take off the bikini. When I saw the beautiful coastline, I thought nothing could be better. But seeing Tracy without clothes against the amazing natural backdrop was a special moment. We laid a blanket on the sand and spent a peaceful time together, listening to the waves. On the 4th day, I discovered a secluded place that gave me an idea. That night, I told Tracy I needed to go to the store and asked her to stay in the motel room. She was curious but didn't stop me. I knew where to go and returned in 40 minutes with something hidden in my camera bag for the next day. Early the next morning, we found another great spot to capture a stunning sunrise. We spent the morning taking pictures of the beautiful seascapes until a little past noon. We found a quiet place nearby and laid our blanket on the beach for lunch. Tracy started to touch my leg, but I had other plans and wasn't ready for anything exciting yet. "What's wrong, honey? Aren't you in the mood?" she asked. "I am in the mood, babe. But I have a little surprise for you around the corner," I told her in a playful voice. "I should have known from last night," she said with a laugh. I gave her a mischievous grin. After lunch, we walked around some big rocks to a hidden canyon I had seen the day before. There was an old tree twisted by the wind. I took pictures of the area from every angle. When I got the shots I wanted, I put my camera away and took out a long black piece of cloth. "Sorry, babe, but it's time to cover your eyes," I said, wrapping the blindfold around her head. Then I took out the rope I bought. I led Tracy under the tree. She gasped as I tied her wrists, not too tightly. I threw the rope over a high branch and pulled her arms up just enough to stretch her body. I secured the rope to a lower branch. Tracy started to breathe heavily as I gently touched her skin. "Shh," I whispered to her, kissing under her chin and down her neck. "Oh, God," she breathed as I took off her top, letting it fall to her feet. She relaxed as I took more photos. Afterward, I put down a blanket and took off my clothes. It was over an hour before we stopped. Later on, our last day, I looked up from my camera and saw Tracy on the beach staring in one direction. There was sadness on her face. "Honey, what's the matter?" I asked, worried. "Just minutes before we were laughing and having fun." "I remember this spot," she said. "I stood here when I was 7 watching my father paint those cliffs. He was so young, strong, and full of life back then," she said, trying not to cry. "Where was he set up?" I asked. "Right here," she said, taking a few steps over. "His easel was right here." I watched in wonder as he painted a beautiful scene with watercolors. She rested her head on my shoulder and started to cry. I put my arm around her to comfort her. I held her for a few minutes until she felt better. Then I stood in the same spot where her father had stood many years ago and recreated his painting on my computer. There was something special about that place. We both felt it. We sat on the beach holding each other and watched the sun disappear behind the waves. Later that night, we didn't do anything romantic. I just held her close because she needed love and support. I quietly thanked God for the chance to be there for her. The next day, we sadly headed home. We got to Chicago just before noon and left the O'Hare parking lot. I had 8 memory cards in my pocket holding more than 1,300 photos. Tracy was really excited to edit them and choose the best ones. We planned to make large prints, so I used the best camera settings. This meant we couldn't look at the photos on my laptop. We needed my special computer at home. We grabbed a quick snack on the way and then hurried to my office to see the photos. I got an extra chair for Tracy and started downloading the first memory card. In a minute, small versions of the photos appeared on my big screen. "Oh my God!" Tracy almost shouted. "Look at these, honey. Every one of them is amazing." "How are we going to pick the best ones?" she wondered. I had to agree. They were really impressive. Nature is beautiful, and I had captured it well. "I got it," Tracy said happily. She kissed my cheek and hugged me. "A one-man show." "What kind of one-man show?" I asked. "You silly. You're going to have a show at my gallery." "Oh God, honey, I'm going to show off your talent. You'll be the most famous photographer in Chicago. We'll pick the best 100 photos and I'll frame them. What do you think?" Before I could answer, she had another idea. "Oh, and we can make hardcover books. We'll put 20 photos in them and you can sign them. Oh, honey, this is going to be the best show ever. What do you think?" I watched in awe as my gentle, loving girlfriend turned into the strong, confident businesswoman I had met many years ago. She grabbed her phone and was about to get started when she suddenly paused. I think I must have looked unsure. I worked as a photographer for factories and shops, not taking pictures of beaches. I wondered if this could harm my business. "I'm sorry, love. Sometimes I get ahead of myself. I didn't even ask if you wanted to do this, did I?" Tracy listened to my worries and thought for a moment. "Honey, like you told me on the beach, I love you and would never do anything to hurt you. If you aren't comfortable with this, we can drop the idea. But please think about it first. I believe this could actually help your business. If we do this, your clients can see that you're good at many kinds of photography. They might respect your work even more." She finished her speech by sitting on my lap and giving me a big kiss. She was so sure of herself. What could I say? "How big do you want the prints?" I asked with a smile. "That's my man," she replied. "How large can you make them?" She got really excited when I told her I could make prints up to 44 inches wide. Tracy started planning right away. She picked a date, October 15th, just 5 weeks away. Every night we chose more photos. I made prints and she took them to work the next day to frame them. Working late at my place also meant she could spend the night with me, which I was really starting to like. Tracy handled everything else too, advertising, sending invitations, and setting up the gallery. She was very busy. When I agreed to the show, I planned a surprise for her. I did all the preparations without telling Tracy. After closing the gallery the Friday before the show, Tracy went into action again. Her brother helped her, Angie and me get everything ready for the next morning. I asked Carl where Judy was, and he said she was home with the baby, but had a babysitter for Saturday, so she'd be there for the first day of the show. We ordered 2 pizzas and worked hard until just before midnight. Since Tracy had been living with me since we got back from California, she followed me home. Even though we should have been very tired from all the work, we were still full of energy. The next day was important, and we knew we needed rest, but we were too excited to sleep. We needed to find a way to calm down. All night long, Tracy had been the one in charge. She was giving everyone directions for the show, saying things like, "No, not there. Over here, that goes here. I want that hung up there." It was clear she had been leading all evening, but now it was my turn to take control. I got home a few minutes before she did and set everything up. It didn't take long. By the time she walked in, I was ready. When she entered the dark living room, she sensed something was happening. "Sir?" she quietly asked. I pressed the button on the remote in my hand, and the projector came to life. The room was suddenly filled with a slideshow of photos of Tracy. The pictures showed her at the beautiful Monterey Bay, and each one popped up on the big screen in quick flashes. I heard her gasp as she saw herself. She was bound with her arms stretched high, reaching for a tree branch. Her body was bathed in the California sun. I was waiting behind the door and approached her from behind. "Yes," I said, "don't move," I instructed as I unzipped her dress. She closed her eyes and leaned back as I touched her shoulders. "How did you know?" she whispered. "How did you know this was exactly what I needed tonight?" "Shh," I said. "No talking. You will do exactly as I say. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered, her breathing growing heavier. I unhooked her bra and let it fall, then removed her panties. Using soft leather cuffs, I gently bound her hands behind her back. I led her to a kitchen chair I had placed in the center of the room, facing the photo display. I inserted a small remote control device inside her, something we planned to use in public but found too strong even at its lowest setting. It was best left for home use. I sat her down in the chair, tying her ankles to the chair legs. "Now, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound serious, "I'm going to turn on the device, but you can't climb acts before finishing me, understand?" "Yes," she replied breathlessly. She gasped as I turned on the device. She was already squirming when I moved closer. I knew that even though I was excited, she wouldn't take long to make me feel really good, but she also had to try hard to keep herself from feeling the same first. It felt like less than 5 minutes before I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tracy was trying not to give in to her own feelings. Just as I pulled away, Tracy let out a loud, happy noise. Feeling a bit shaky, I sat down on the edge of the couch. I turned off the small device we used and watched as Tracy started to return to normal. She opened her eyes, still breathing heavily. A big smile appeared on her beautiful face, and she looked at me with love. I untied her and took her to bed, where we got under the sheets. Before long, we were close again, enjoying each other's company like people who are deeply in love. The next day, I woke up an hour before the alarm. I was too excited to sleep. Not wanting to wake Tracy, I carefully moved my arm and used the bathroom in the hall. I put on my robe and went downstairs to make coffee. Tracy joined me after a few minutes. "Are you excited?" she asked, wearing one of my white dress shirts. "Oh yeah," I replied with a smile. "Not me, silly," she said, walking over and kissing me. "I mean about your show today," she laughed. "Oh, that, yes, I'm very excited," I said. I walked to the counter and poured her a cup of coffee. "Here you go, beautiful," I said, placing it on the table. "Have some coffee while I make breakfast." "How did you know exactly what I needed last night?" she asked, shyly. "I don't know. I just did," I said. I hadn't really thought about it, but she was right. How did I know? I guess our closeness as a couple had grown deeper than I had realized. Thinking about it made me smile. Tracy must have been thinking the same thing because she had a big grin on her face, too. We arrived at the gallery an hour before it opened. Even though we did a lot the night before, we still needed to make coffee, chill the water, and set out snacks. Angie arrived right after us, and Carl and Judy came a few minutes later. We opened the doors at 9 o'clock, and I was surprised by how many people were already waiting. The gallery quickly filled with people saying, "Ooh" and "Ah," as they looked at the art. In the first 20 minutes, I sold $600 worth of prints and signed 2 books. By the time I started checking for Tracy's surprise at 10 o'clock, the gallery was full. I watched closely as a special SUV stopped near the door. Tracy was talking to someone when the big side door of the car opened and a man in a wheelchair got lowered to the sidewalk by an electric lift. Tracy noticed this from the corner of her eye, but didn't understand what was happening until a kind-looking woman with gray hair stepped out of the car and stood behind the wheelchair. She began pushing the man forward, and the driver held the door open for them. "Mom! Dad!" Tracy shouted. "Oh, my God!" Everyone stopped and looked as Tracy ran to her mom and dad with tears in her eyes, hugging them both. It took a few minutes for Tracy to calm down enough to speak. "How did you get here? Your nice young man over there arranged it for us," her mom said. Tracy looked at me with tears of thanks. Just then, Carl and Judy, who were helping with something in the back, came out to see what was going on. They also rushed over and welcomed her parents with hugs. Tracy had often talked about how she tried to get her dad out of the house, but he felt embarrassed about his condition and didn't want people to see him. Tracy came over and put her arm around me while her brother fussed over their parents. "How did you do it? How did you get him to come?" "It was easy," I said. She gave me a look that said she knew it wasn't easy. "Okay, maybe not that easy. I had to charm your mom first. Once she was on my side, we both convinced your dad. When I explained that this day was very special for his daughter, he finally agreed. After that, nothing could stop him. I told her, 'I love you,' she said, kissing me on the cheek. She didn't know it yet, but I had a few more surprises for her before the day ended. As time went by, I grew more and more amazed at how much people liked my photos. Between Tracy and me, we had printed and framed 110 pictures in different sizes. Also, she had 200 hardcover coffee table books made with 20 more pictures each. Each book sold for $20. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, only 60 books were left, and a lot more wall space was empty than in the morning. "Didn't I tell you, honey?" Tracy whispered as she came over and held my arm. "If there's one thing I know, it's what people like to hang on their walls. I never imagined anything like this," I said, looking around. I guess I'm just surprised that people are really paying this much to have one of my photos on their wall." Tracy smiled. "I added everything up. We had about $35,000 worth of art for the show. It's not even the end of the first day, and we've sold 2/3 of it. I think we'll sell out by tomorrow." My knees felt weak. Sharing the money with Tracy meant I would get about $17,000. That was pretty good, especially considering how much fun Tracy and I had putting everything together. I smiled and kissed her. "Honey, it's getting late, and I bet your parents are getting tired." "But there's something I want to do before they leave," I told her. She looked curious as I ran to the back room where I had my surprise hidden. I walked back out to the gallery. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, raising my voice to get their attention. "I want to thank everyone for coming today, and for all the kind and generous comments you've given me. You really know how to make a guy feel good." The crowd chuckled a little. "I also want to thank the wonderful Tracy Anderson for talking me into doing this, and for all her hard work making this event so special. I also want to thank her helper Angie and her brother Carl and his lovely wife Judy for helping too." Everyone clapped. I have a very special thanks for someone because without them, none of this would be possible, Mr. and Mrs. Todd Anderson. I paused for a moment as everyone applauded again. I'm sure you've all seen the beautiful watercolor paintings Mr. Anderson is famous for. One of his paintings inspired this whole exhibit, and I want to give Mr. and Mrs. Anderson a small thank you gift. When I finished speaking, I unwrapped their gift and gave it to Tracy's parents. Mr. Anderson recognized it right away. I saw it in his eyes and the tear on his cheek. "Oh, look, it's just like your painting," Mrs. Anderson said, hugging her husband. He couldn't talk anymore because of his illness, but he nodded quickly. I heard some gasps and saw Tracy and Carl looking surprised. It was the first time they had seen it. It had been my secret project since Tracy told me about her dad painting those cliffs. I made the print when Tracy was at the gallery and gave it to my framer. I picked it up on Friday before the show and hid it in the shop earlier when Tracy was busy. What no one knew was that I had also made smaller versions for Tracy and Carl. I slipped their driver $50 to help Mr. and Mrs. Anderson with the photo once they got home. After those few hours, time seemed to fly. Tracy counted up our sales before we left. On our first day, we made $22,000. After we closed the shop, I suggested we eat downtown since we were already there. We found a nice little place on Wacker Drive and enjoyed dinner. My girl kept saying how great it was that I made the day so special for her parents. She couldn't stop talking about how I managed to sneak that big framed picture into her gallery without her knowing, and she didn't know what else I had in store. "That was good," I said, as we stepped out of the restaurant. "It's a beautiful night, and we won't have many like this for a while. How about we walk down to the lakefront?" She stood on her tiptoes and kissed me. I took that as a yes. We went down by the rocks and watched as the full moon came up from the water and lit a path on the waves, ending at our feet. Tracy rested her head on my shoulder, and I put my arm around her, holding her close. "I just don't know how I will ever thank you for what you did for Mom and Dad," she said softly. This was the moment. I took a deep breath. "Honey, have you ever thought about all the things we've shared since we met?" "Shared? No, not really. Why?" "Well, I was thinking the other day we share a love for art in almost every form. We share a love for Shakespeare. You've shared your deepest secrets with me. We shared a vacation." She started to look at me a bit puzzled, wondering where I was going with this. I reached into my pocket and took out a small box. "Honey, I have something I want to share with you." She put her hand to her mouth in surprise as I got down on one knee. "My darling Tracy Anderson, I want to share the rest of my life with you," I said, showing her the ring. "Oh my God, honey, yes," she shouted. "Oh God, how I love you." "Yes, yes, yes, I will marry you." She leaned down and hugged me tightly, kissed me, and cried happy tears. It was a day I'll always remember. Later that night was also very special thanks to Tracy. Sunday at the gallery was even busier than the day before. Carl and Judy, her parents, were there again to help us. Luckily, Tracy thought to have a catalog printed because, by the afternoon, we had very few prints left. She started taking orders for more. I was talking with a client of mine who said he just ordered a large print for his office when I felt a tap on my shoulder and heard a familiar voice. "Hello, Dalton." I turned and looked into the big brown eyes of the woman who used to be my everything. "Jean," I said, a little out of breath. I often wondered how I'd feel if I saw her again. I never hated her. I remember thinking I wished I could. Maybe it would have made the pain easier to handle. Seeing her again brought back the old pain, but it wasn't really there anymore. Tracy did a good job of replacing it with love. "How are you doing?" she asked, extending her hand. "I'm doing well, Jean. How about you?" She smiled a bit shyly and didn't answer my question. Instead, she looked around until her eyes found one of the large photos still on the wall. "Looks like you're doing very well, Dalton. Your own show at a beautiful downtown gallery. When did you start doing things like this?" Just then, Tracy came over to give me an update on sales. She took my arm, kissed my cheek, and then offered her hand to Jean, not knowing who she was. "Hello, ma'am. I see you've met the photographer. Have you had a chance to look around? We have a few pieces left, but we also have catalogs on that table, and we're taking orders." "Honey?" I interrupted, seeing John's face like she was about to be hit by a train. "This is Jean, my ex-wife. Jean, this is Tracy, the owner of this gallery, and my fiancé." I heard a tiny gasp from Jean. She looked at Tracy and then back at me. "Oh, congratulations," she said, trying and failing to force a small smile. "Thank you," Tracy replied cheerfully. I could see the pain in Jean's face. It seems she didn't have anyone in her life and might have hoped to rekindle something. Her eyes were wet with tears. "Well, let me look around at your work," she said, turning away to hide her tears. I watched as she went over to one of the large photos left. I saw her sneak a tissue from her purse to dry her eyes. Tracy tugged on my arm and I followed her to the table on the other side of the gallery. "She's still in love with you. You know that, right? Tracy whispered. Yeah, I kinda got that feeling, I said. I looked at Tracy and saw her big heart. She felt sorry for Jean. What can I do? I said, answering the question in her eyes. Here, she said, picking up the last coffee table book we had. Write something nice and give it to her for old time's sake. I wasn't sure I wanted to, not wanting to send the wrong signal. But one look at Tracy's kind face and I knew I could be nice. Hopefully, Jean would see it for what it was, a final gift of friendship. To Jean, we share many great memories. I wish you the very best in a future full of happy times. Signed, Dalton. How's that? I asked, showing Tracy what I wrote. She leaned over and kissed me again. Perfect. You're a good man, she told me. That's just one of the reasons I love you. Will you come with me to give it to her? I asked. No, you should do it yourself. If I go with you, it might not feel real. Okay, I said, walking toward Jean. She was still looking at the sea and wiping her eyes when she thought no one was watching. Jean, she turned around, still trying to smile. Listen, I want you to have this. We had a lot of good times together and, well, I thought you might like it. She looked surprised when I handed her the book. She stopped trying to hold back her tears. They rolled down her face as she read the note inside. Thank you, Dalton, she cried. I truly wish you and your new wife happiness from the bottom of my heart. I just wish it could have been me, she said, starting to break down. She hugged the book close to her chest, reached up, gave me a kiss, and quickly left the room. That would be the last time we saw or heard from Jean for a couple of years. The following June, Tracy and I got married. My friend Jack was my best man. We stood in front of the minister and watched the most beautiful bride in the world walk down the aisle with her father, who was pushed in a wheelchair by Tracy's brother, Carl. I doubt there was a dry eye in the place. No one knew how much longer Mr. Anderson had, and everyone felt happy that he could be there for his daughter's wedding. For our honeymoon, we went back to Monterey Bay. This time, besides taking pictures of the beautiful spot where the wind and surf meet the sand, we also took hundreds of photos of Fisherman's Wharf and Cannery Row. We had plenty for another show. Tracy knew what she was talking about when she said that first show would help my business. I no longer had to look for new clients. They came to me. Dalton's commercial photography was no longer a one-man job. I had to hire 2 more photographers, a graphic artist, and a secretary. Epilogue. It had been 3 years since the night I proposed to Tracy. A lot has happened since then. After we returned from our honeymoon, Tracy put together another show. It was so successful that she opened a second gallery in the northwest suburbs. It's smaller, but doing very well. She also asked a publishing company to make a book of my photos. They were happy to do it, and the book is doing well. Tracy's dad sadly passed away about a year ago. Her mom, blessed her, took care of him until the end. Carl and Judy built a small apartment at the back of their house for her. It has a living room, bedroom, and small kitchen so she can have her own space and privacy. The big news is the birth of our wonderful daughter, Taylor. She's 6 months old now and looks more like her mom every day. I know some of you are wondering what happened to Jean. I met her dad about a year ago, and he said she still worked at Worthington Industries and seemed to be doing well in her job. But he was worried about her personal life. Jean had joined some online dating sites that focused on the BDSM lifestyle. He'd seen marks on her from some of her dates, which worried him. He hoped she would settle down someday with someone nice. One day it was nice outside, so Tracy and I took Taylor for a walk in her stroller. As we passed a park bench, I heard someone call my name, Dalton. Tracy and I turned and saw Jean. She looked surprised and then sad when she saw Taylor remembering our plans to start a family. She asked to hold Taylor, and we let her. Jean told us about her promotion at work, pretending to be happy, but I could see sadness in her eyes. As we were about to leave, Jean noticed Tracy's choker. "Oh, Tracy, I love your choker," she said. "Thank you." "It was a gift from Dalton," Tracy replied, showing it off. "I can't take it off because there's a personal message inside and it's locked. Only Dalton has the key." Jean's eyes widened as she realized what the choker was. "It's locked. Is it a slave collar?" Tracy smiled, knowing Jean understood. She gave Jean a playful look and said, "Come on, Master, giving me a kiss. We have to go." I took Taylor from Jean and put her back in the stroller. We said our goodbyes and continued our walk, leaving Jean on the bench with a shocked look on her face. "You should have asked Jean." "You should have asked," I said to her. As they left, Dalton glanced back at Jean, who still looked shocked. "You should have asked Jean." "You should have asked," he said again. Suddenly, her stomach felt awful. She leaned over as the bitter-tasting yellow and green liquid came up her throat and spewed from her mouth and nose, burning her senses and soaking into the concrete sidewalk. Terrified that they heard her being sick, Jean looked their way, but they had walked far enough away that they didn't notice. She pulled a tissue from her purse and hurried towards her apartment. In the 4 years since their divorce, Jean had never felt such a deep sadness. All this time, she kept herself from totally breaking down by thinking that if she and Dalton had stayed together, she would have never explored a different part of herself. That thought had been her only comfort after losing the man she loved. She ran towards her apartment almost out of control with sadness after seeing her ex-husband with his new wife, his new submissive wife. "You should have asked," he said, breaking the illusion she had held on to. How could she have asked him? Dalton was everything to her, her hero, her king, her protector. She couldn't destroy that image. At the time, she wanted to talk to him but couldn't. A coworker, Irv, suggested they try some simple bondage games. It seemed harmless and fun, and there was no way Dalton would ever find out. At first, it was innocent. They didn't even take off their clothes. It was fun, and she felt a bit naughty. Then they got braver. Soon Jean found herself tied up in her underwear while Irv touched her. She couldn't stop him. That was the thrill. It was exciting and felt so forbidden. As time passed, Irv became bolder and she allowed it. When everything went wrong, Jean's heart broke into pieces. She would always remember the 2 words Irv said that day in the motel room. Those words shattered her world. "It's Dalton." Jean ran inside, slammed the door shut, then fell to the floor. She hugged her knees and cried. What was happening? Jean felt lost and confused. Where was she? What time was it? Then she heard a noise. Her phone was ringing. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and saw she was still wearing yesterday's clothes. She blinked, trying to clear her eyes from the dried tears. Slowly, her memories started to come back. The last thing she remembered was leaning against the door, crying. She must have crawled into bed and cried herself to sleep. Oh no, did she sleep all night? What day was it? She searched for her phone and found it in her jean pocket just like the day before when she saw them. "Hello?" she said weakly. "Jean, are you okay?" a worried voice asked. "Yeah, I think so." "Who?" Her mind was still foggy. "Jean, it's Belle. Are you sure you're okay? You don't sound good?" Yeah, I'm okay. I think I must have fallen asleep. What time is it? It's after 10. Everyone's wondering where you are. You didn't even call in. What's going on?" Jean started waking up. She heard the worry in Belle's voice and realized it was Monday morning. She should have been at work an hour ago. "Oh no," she said, understanding her situation. "Belle, can you do me a favor? Tell Mr. Jacobson I wasn't feeling well this morning, but I'm better now. I'll be there by noon, please." "You're lucky," said Belle. "Mr. Jacobson is out and won't be back until 2, so hurry and get here. I need to take a shower. Then I'll come as fast as I can," Jean said. As she ended the call, her stomach growled. She needed food before her shower. She walked to the kitchen, recalling more memories from yesterday. She remembered seeing her ex-husband, his new wife, and their baby daughter as they walked by the park bench where she sat. The memory of their conversation returned, and so did her sadness. She had seen the silver necklace, a sad reminder of the life she could have shared with her husband. New tears filled her eyes as she scrambled some eggs. She blamed herself for being such a fool. She could have had it all if she had trusted her husband and shared her hopes with him. Even if he didn't want to join in, she should have known he would still love her. Only the pain of seeing her with someone else could change that. As the week went by, Jean tried to find some comfort. For the past few years, she hadn't been dating at all, not in her usual circles or outside of them. She decided it was time to start meeting people again. Jean never used her work computer for personal stuff, so she waited until she was home alone to visit some dating sites she found after her divorce. There were 2 main sites she had profiles on. Like most women, she found over 300 emails waiting for her. Most were from overly eager men looking for a quick hookup, but she saw a few messages that seemed genuine. When she checked the other site, it was the same deal. This is going to take a while, she thought. Before diving into the sea of messages to find her perfect match, Jean decided to grab something to eat and maybe have a glass of wine first. After an hour or so, she felt happier with a full stomach and a slight buzz. She sat down to start sorting through her daunting task. Most messages were quickly deleted, but a few caught her eye. She wasn't looking for a fling or just someone to hang out with. She wanted a relationship or something close to it. She needed someone to take her mind off Dalton and his new family. She narrowed it down to 4 men and looked at their profiles. One lived more than an hour away, but the other 3 were nearby. She planned a little test. On another website, she saw an event happening a week from Friday night. It was a small, informal gathering for people in her lifestyle, a good place to meet new folks. She wrote to the 3 men she picked, telling each one that she would be there. Let's see if they show up, she thought. It would be a safe place to get to know them a bit before setting up any real dates. The following Sunday, she went to her parents' house for dinner and mentioned seeing Dalton and his wife Tracy. Her eyes filled with tears again as she told them how they let her hold their baby. She tried really hard to put on a happy face, but even after so much time had passed, the pain of her loss was clear on her face. "Honey," her mom said, placing her hand on Jean's, "you're still young. You'll find someone again, someone who will love you deeply." "I don't know, Mom. It's been 4 years and I haven't found anyone like Dalton. I still love him and I think I always will." "Jean, sweetie," her dad added, "I love Dalton like a son, but he's not the only person out there. There are others, you just have to find one." Jean nodded, but she knew it wasn't as easy as her dad thought. Maybe she'd find someone next week, she hoped. As each day of the following week passed, Jean found herself getting more excited about Friday night's event. In the middle of the week, she looked again at the profiles of the 3 men she had asked to meet her there. She felt hopeful. Maybe it wasn't real hope, but it was something. On Thursday, after work, she went shopping for the right outfit. She found a sheer but not too sheer black blouse and a short, tight black skirt that made her feel confident. She already had 4-inch black heels. The big choice left was whether to wear comfortable underwear or buy something special. She thought at first, who's going to see it? I'll just wear my normal black lace underwear. But when she walked by the window of a lingerie store, she changed her mind. I want to feel good, she told herself. Now she was excited as she looked for something that would make her feel confident. She found a pair of black thong panties and a matching bra. Perfect, she said softly. Even though she was excited, she waited in the parking lot until she saw several people go inside. She wanted to make her entrance when the party was busy. She had only been to 1 or 2 of these gatherings before, but had a good idea of the kind of competition she would face. Sadly, most of the people hanging around and trying to get her attention were the same people she had ruled out on the websites. She kept looking, hoping to see at least one of the 3 men she had chosen. After an hour, though, she was losing hope. Jean decided to finish her drink and leave. Just as she drank the last of her white wine, someone gently bumped her arm. Here, take this, said a deep voice on her left. Jean looked over and saw one of the men from the website standing next to her with a new glass of wine. Jean hesitated. She usually liked to get her own drinks. It was too easy for someone to slip something into a drink these days. Jean looked up at him but didn't reach for the drink. Nobody cares, he said bluntly. Do you go by Sir Kevin? She asked. Kevin gave a knowing smile. Yes, that's right here. He pushed the drink toward her. It's just wine. It's safe. She took the drink cautiously. Let's find a place to sit and chat, he suggested. Of all the guys she picked, he was the one she really hoped would show up. He was the most handsome. She learned his real name was Kevin McMichaels. He worked as a service manager at a car dealership. As they talked, Jean felt more at ease and took her first sip of wine. He seemed to be everything she wanted so far. He was tall, maybe 6'2", well-built, with thick sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. Once they finished small talk, he asked what she was looking for in a relationship. I don't want anything full-time, she said. Let me explain. I mean, I'm not a full-time slave or anything. I just like to feel helpless sometimes, like in a pretend way, she added with a smile. I'm not really into pain, though. Maybe just a little. Kevin nodded and listened closely. Have you had any long-term relationships in this kind of lifestyle? He asked. No. When I first tried it out, it ended badly, she said sadly. Years ago, I tried it with someone. We played bondage games for several months, but it ended badly. Who ended it? You or him? He asked. My husband caught us, Jean said, wondering why she was sharing so much with someone she just met. Maybe because she hoped for something real and didn't want any secrets. I see, he said in a serious tone. So you're divorced? Yes, for the last 4 years, she admitted. If we get into any kind of relationship, I won't tolerate cheating, Kevin made clear. Oh no, I've learned my lesson. I'd never do that again, Jean said quickly. There was a brief silence. Kevin looked at her, thinking about what she had said. You're a very pretty woman, Jean, Kevin finally said. Thank you, Kevin, she replied, her cheeks turning slightly pink. Do you have any tattoos or piercings? No, that's not really my thing, Jean answered. Good. There's nothing worse than getting a woman's clothes off and finding a tattoo that says property of Mad Max, he said with a laugh. Jean was starting to really like him. Many guys at these events would try to get physical quickly or show off how tough they were, but Kevin seemed confident and sure of himself without being pushy. He was clearly smart and had a good sense of humor, too. Excuse me, Kevin, I need to use the restroom, she said, standing up with a smile. After finishing in the bathroom, John stood before the mirror fixing her hair. A heavy-set woman dressed in traditional clothing came up to wash her hands. Be careful of the guy you're with, she said, looking at Jean through the mirror's reflection. Who, you mean Kevin? Yeah, Kevin. He can be real mean, the woman replied. He seems nice to me, Jean said a bit defensive. Okay, honey, don't say I didn't warn you. With that, the woman with tattoos on her arms walked out, leaving John to think about her words. Jealousy, Jean thought to herself. It's everywhere. But now she was starting to worry. A small shiver ran down her spine. She hated all this dating and socializing stuff. She wasn't young anymore. She missed Dalton. When Jean sat back down, she looked like she was about to cry. Hey, what's wrong? Kevin asked. Nothing. I just thought about something sad, she said, taking a tissue to wipe her eyes. Maybe I can cheer you up. It's late to do anything tonight, but how about dinner tomorrow around 7? I'll pick you up, he suggested with a smile. Jean was hesitant. She remembered the woman's warning. Did she have a reason for lying? Jean tried to read Kevin's eyes. People say eyes are the windows to the soul. What kind of soul did he have? He seemed nice, but she couldn't tell for sure. She decided to be careful. That sounds fun. I'd love it. But I have things to do after work. Why don't I meet you there? She replied. Did you have a place in mind? Kevin's wide, friendly smile made her wonder if she was being too cautious. Then she noticed the woman from the restroom looking their way and shaking her head. Jean felt a small cringe in her stomach again. All day Saturday, Jean spent her time wondering and worrying if she did the right thing. That woman's warning kept playing in her head. Why would a stranger say something like that to her if it wasn't true? Was it just as she originally thought? Jealousy? Or maybe she had a grudge against him for some reason. It was too late now. Nervously, John got ready for her date. She picked out something nice, but not too flashy. Certainly nothing like what she wore to the club. She thought she saw some disappointment in Kevin's face when he greeted her at the restaurant. Tough luck, she thought. It's our first date. What did he expect? As the night went on, it seemed Kevin didn't expect much. In fact, he was a perfect gentleman. And by the end of the evening, Jean was sure the woman in the washroom was just jealous. That was the only reason she could think of for her to say such weird things about Kevin. After dinner, they talked for a few minutes in the parking lot before he leaned in and gave her a soft, sweet kiss goodbye. She felt her heart flutter, and her hopes rose high as she drove home. The next day, he called to say he had a wonderful time and asked if he could call back in a couple of days to plan something for the end of the week. She gladly said yes. Over the next 2 weeks, Jean couldn't be happier. Even though Kevin knew about her preferences, he treated her with kindness and respect. She loved how attentive he was, but started to wonder if his gentlemanlike ways would continue in more private moments. She hoped that once they were alone, he might take control more firmly, rather than gently. She wanted to find out. Jean had known Kevin for a whole month, and during that time he had been nothing but polite and kind. She had no worries about introducing him to her family. It was her parents' 35th anniversary in another week, and Jean had planned a great night for them with dinner and dancing. Now she also had a date for herself. As they sat and talked in the restaurant, Jean could tell her dad and mom were impressed with Kevin. Only when the two ladies were alone did her mom express any concerns. "Kevin seems like a nice man, honey. Where did you meet him?" Both of Jean's parents knew she was into a different lifestyle. They didn't really approve, but supported her because she was their daughter. They also hoped she would lose interest in that kind of thing. Jean saw no reason to lie to her mother. "I met him at a party, Mom." "So he's one of those, what do you call them, doms?" she asked, clearly not approving. "Yes, Mom," Jean said, "but to be honest, he hasn't really acted like one. He's been more caring than some of the regular guys I've dated." Jean's mom sighed a little. "Just be careful, honey. I don't trust anyone who likes to hurt women, even if they say they enjoy it." "Mom, I don't like getting hurt. I know, honey," her mom cut in. "You've told me all about it, but I still think it's hurting," she said, frowning. "Look, honey, you're my daughter. I love you very much, and I don't want to see you get hurt. All I'm saying is take your time. It's been a while since you've had someone special, and I don't want you to rush into something. That's all." "Thanks, Mom," Jean said, giving her mom a kiss on the cheek. "I'll be careful, I promise." Just then, the men came back to the table with drinks for everyone. The rest of the evening was perfect. After dinner, they all went to a dance club. Jean's parents showed off their dancing moves, and everyone admired them. During a slow dance, Jean smiled as she pressed close to Kevin, feeling safe in his strong arms. The following Wednesday, Kevin took Jean to a movie. It wasn't a movie she would have chosen, and she would have liked to have a say in it, but this was the first time he had shown any dominant behavior, so she didn't complain. In the dark cinema, Jean felt Kevin's hand moving up her thigh. It had been a long time since she had been with someone, and she was definitely ready for more. Though they were in public, Jean moved her hips to meet his touch. She heard Kevin's soft laugh filled with confidence. He didn't seem to care who might see as he pushed her underwear aside. Weeks had passed, and Jean was seeing a new side to Kevin. She liked it, though she preferred this kind of closeness to stay in the bedroom, not in a crowded theater. "Oh no, not here," she whispered. Without speaking, Kevin placed his free arm around her neck and pulled her closer, kissing her deeply. His strong hand caressed her gently, making her gasp. Jean lost track of where she was as her breathing got faster. Kevin's voice barely reached Jean's mind. "Are you really going to lose control in a crowded theater?" he whispered. "No," she tried to say as she fought off the feeling building inside her. "Please don't make me do this, not here." "Yes, right here," he said softly. "Come for me, but keep it quiet so no one finds out," he said, as he continued to move his hand back and forth between her legs. Jean's breathing grew quick and uneven. She was trying hard to hold back the rush of emotions and sensations. "Oh," she sighed, trying not to be too loud. "Shh," Kevin warned with a small laugh. She couldn't hold back anymore when he pinched her gently. She cried out as the feelings overwhelmed her. Kevin showed her his finger. "Lick it clean," he told her, still caught up in the moment. She didn't care who saw. She took his finger in her mouth and cleaned it. Kevin felt confident, knowing he had control. The man behind them leaned forward, speaking quietly but angrily. "Why don't you get a room and let us watch the movie?" Kevin smirked. "Can she help it if she's excitable?" he said with a laugh. "Hey, come up here and you can join in." An angry woman next to the man also leaned forward. "You have 30 seconds to leave before I call the police," she snapped. Must be his wife, Kevin thought. Better get going. Jean was still catching her breath as Kevin took her arm and led her up the aisle. People stared and snickered. Outside, Jean had calmed down. "Why did you do that?" she shouted, pulling her arm free. "What's wrong with you? You've always been so respectful, and then you pull something like this. What if someone I know saw?" "Relax," he said, sounding serious. "I was just having some fun, no harm done." "Look," she said, still upset, "when I said I was okay with certain things, I meant in private, not in public." Okay, maybe I went too far," he admitted. "But did you have fun? Have you ever done anything like this before?" "No, and I'm not doing it again," she said, looking into his eyes. Jean had to admit, though only to herself, that it was kind of fun. "All right," Kevin said with a tone that sounded like he was talking down to her. "From now on, I'll keep the bossy stuff for the bedroom ... deal." He held out his hand. She smiled and said, "Deal," shaking his hand once. Kevin held her hand tight and pulled her into his chest. "But right now you owe me. I made you happy. Now it's your turn. Come on, you can make me happy in the back seat of my car where no one will see us." Jean's mind raced as they walked through the parking lot. What had happened? Where was her polite gentleman boyfriend, and who was this bossy guy taking his place? She wasn't sure if she liked this new side of him. It was a bit scary. Still, she felt more excited than she had in a long time. She could feel herself getting more excited with every step. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't even notice when they reached Kevin's car until she heard him open the door. "Come on, get in there and kneel on the floor so no one sees you." She did what he said because it was kind of fun. Kevin got in next to her and shut the door. He pulled his pants and his shorts down together. Jean watched as he revealed himself. "There it is, babe. From now on, my body is your focus and you will treat it that way, understand?" "Yes," she said, looking up at him. "Yes, what?" he snapped. "Yes, Sir Kevin," she said, remembering what he wanted to be called from his online profile. "Okay, get started." For the next couple of days, Jean was confused. On one hand, Jean really liked the well-behaved and polite Kevin she had dated at first. But on the other hand, she couldn't stop thinking about the forceful Kevin from the other night, even though he went too far at the theater. She didn't like that at all. She knew she had to make it clear to him that she wouldn't put up with any more public outbursts. Her fantasies were meant for behind closed doors, and that's where they should stay, she told herself. By Friday, Jean had decided on some firm rules she would talk about with Kevin before moving forward. When he picked her up that night, Kevin seemed a bit grumpy in the car, so she decided to wait until they reached his place to talk. She was sure it was going to be a special night. She pictured them cuddling on the couch. He would hold her close, and they'd share sweet kisses. There would be a bottle of wine chilling nearby. At the right time, she would explain her rules for the bedroom. Then they would get close and share an intimate moment. She had it all planned and was looking forward to it. "Okay, take off your clothes," he demanded as he shut the door and locked it. Jean turned to face him, anger in her eyes. This was not what she wanted. "Hold on," she protested. Kevin grabbed her arm roughly. "Shut up and undress," he ordered again. Jean pulled away, letting out an exasperated gasp as she stood her ground. She remembered the warning from the woman in the restroom the night they met. Could she have been right? "I don't think so," she said, moving towards the door. Kevin grabbed her shoulders and shoved her, almost making her fall. A slap to her cheek sent her tumbling backwards onto the couch. She looked up at him in shock. The fear on her face was exactly what he wanted. "If you're not out of those clothes by the time I count to 3, I'm going to tear them off and you'll walk home naked," he growled. Tears welled up in her eyes as Jean hurriedly started to undress. "That's better," Kevin snarled. "Don't ever make me repeat myself." Quickly, she removed her clothing, her body trembling with fear as she stood before him. Kevin felt very proud of himself. With just a bit of planning, he knew how he was going to control her. He had lots of plans. "Get down on your knees," he ordered, pointing to the floor. Jen couldn't believe this was happening. She had dreamed of submitting, but not like this. This was not enjoyable at all. Jean hoped he wouldn't hurt her too badly. She planned to follow his commands to avoid making him angry again. But as soon as she got away, she'd go to the police and have him arrested. She dropped to her knees. Jean's hands shook and she could taste her tears as she did what he said. She pulled his zipper down and reached into his pants. "Please," she begged. "If you let me go now, I won't tell anyone, I promise." Kevin laughed as he pushed her onto the bed. "We live in interesting times," he said. "With the internet and some searching, you can find out a lot about people. You were easy. I just Googled you. Did you know arrest records are public?" She looked more scared. "Yeah, I know all about your arrest for cheating. I even know what you were wearing. Nothing but some cuffs and a toy. What are you going to do, go to the cops? They already know you're into this stuff. It's your word against mine." "But officer, she begged me to do it. Who do you think they'd believe?" Jean started to cry quietly. "Then there's your ex," he went on. "Dalton, right? He's a well-known photographer with his own business, even has a book out. His wife has a couple of art galleries. How do you think he'd like being dragged into this?" "Please, please don't do this," she cried. "And if that's not enough to keep you quiet, think about your family." He saw real fear in her eyes now. Remember that nice older couple we met at dinner a few weeks ago? I have some friends who aren't as nice as me. How do you think your dad would feel if they went to visit your parents and did something bad to your mom right in front of him? I can make that happen with one call, even if I'm in jail. And if they said something, guess who would get hurt? Yes, you. You think they would risk that? So don't talk about going to the police or anyone else. Keep quiet and do what I say, understand? Yes, she whispered sadly. Jean felt hopeless and started to cry. Oh, poor baby, he said mockingly. Since this is a corner unit, no one can hear you through the wall, but just in case he got up and went to his dresser. Here, open your mouth. With tears running down her face, Jean opened her mouth as wide as she could. He forced a gag between her teeth. Now I think it's clear what our relationship is. You are here to do what I say without any questions. I don't care where we are. If I tell you to do something, you will do it. Is that clear? Jean couldn't understand it all, but knew she had to nod her head. Good girl, he said with a wicked smile, just to make sure you truly get it. I'm going to give you a little example of what happens if you disobey me or make me mad. Kevin pushed her down on the bed and made her lie straight. She was still crying hard when he turned her over on her stomach. He tied her feet together and fastened them to the end of the bed. Then he took another piece of rope, tied a loop at one end, and placed it around her neck. Jean was already scared, but now she feared for her life. He tied the other end of the rope to the headboard and tightened it until it fit snugly around her throat. With her hand still tied behind her back, she couldn't move. Now you'll learn a lesson. Never trust anyone, he said with a dark laugh. Kevin went to his closet and took out a thin stick. He stood by the bed and tapped Jean lightly with it. Then he ran it over her skin as if trying to scare her. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Jean's body. Kevin struck her hard. She tried to scream, but the gag muffled her cries. As he left, Kevin told her he wouldn't be able to see her again until the next Friday and reminded her to keep quiet. He kissed her like everything was normal. She collapsed as soon as he was out the door and cried for the next hour. Jean felt completely lost and terrified. She thought a nice hot bath might calm her nerves and ease some of the pain, but the hot water stung as she got in. She cried out when she submerged her hurting parts and could barely sit on the hard tub with her bruised body. Finally, the pain started to lessen. She stretched out and let the warm water cover her entire body. Jean tried to come up with a plan. She thought, there must be something I can do. But the more she tried, the more she felt hopeless about escaping from the evil man. Later that evening, she tried to ignore her worries long enough to make herself some food. All she had since Friday night was some cold pizza. Sleep didn't come easy, and the next morning she still felt too sick for work, so she called in sick. By Tuesday morning, her body was getting better from the pain, but she still had bruises, especially around her wrists and neck. She could hide most of it with clothes, but she was worried about the black eye. She tried her best to cover it with makeup, but it was still noticeable. She made up a lie for anyone who asked about it. She chose a winter blouse with long sleeves and a high collar, but could still see the mark around her throat. After a moment, she pulled a scar from her drawer and tied it loosely around her neck. She hoped her coworkers would think she was just starting a new fashion trend. She got to work a bit early, hoping to avoid questions about how she looked. It almost worked until her best friend Belle walked into her office. Belle was one of the few who stayed by her side through her divorce. Jean, what happened to your eye? Belle asked with concern. Oh, I hit myself with a cabinet door in the kitchen, Jean said, trying to sound convincing. The door was stuck, so I yanked it and it came back and hit me. Geez, that must have hurt badly. It looks really painful. Yeah, Jean forced a smile. Thanks for telling me how bad I look. Then Belle noticed Jean's clothes. What the heck? She almost shouted. It's 80 degrees out and you're wearing long sleeves and a scarf? What's going on, Jean? Nothing, John replied, not very convincingly. I was sick all weekend with chills, and I'm just trying to stay warm today, that's all. John could see doubt on her friend's face and knew she didn't believe her. Despite her efforts, John couldn't stop the fear from showing in her eyes, and then they started to water. Bull, Belle said. Something is wrong. Did someone hurt you? No, denied Jean firmly. No, Belle, please, just leave me alone right now, please. It was clear to Belle that something was terribly wrong with her friend, and she wasn't going to be brushed off until she found out what it was. She pulled a chair up to the side of Jean's desk and sat down stubbornly. "Listen, remember me? You know I won't leave until you tell me what's going on," said Belle firmly. Jean didn't know what to do. She was scared of Kevin. What would happen if she told? What about her parents? She buried her face in her hands and started crying. When she did, the sleeves of her blouse slid up, showing bruises on her wrists. "Oh my God, who did this to you?" Belle yelled, jumping up to look closer. She saw Jean was hiding something under her scarf. Jean winced as Belle gently removed it. "Someone really hurt you," Belle said, seeing the rope burns. "I won't leave until you tell me what's happening, Jean. I mean it." "Belle, you have to promise not to tell anyone," Jean pleaded. "I can't promise that. Whoever did this should be in jail. Don't you see? You don't know him. He said he's watching me. He said if I talked, he'd send people to hurt my mom in front of my dad." "Belle, he's mean. I'm really scared." Jean began to cry harder. "Does this have anything to do with that stuff you like?" Belle asked gently. Jean looked shocked. She didn't know Belle knew about her private life. "Don't be surprised," Belle told her. "My husband is a cop who worked on your case. Your secret is safe with me. I haven't told anyone." "Oh, Belle, I'm so ashamed," John said, not able to look her friend in the eye. "Ass-hamed? Lots of people like that stuff. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Is this guy supposed to be a dumb or something?" "Yes," John nodded. "But it's worse than that. He enjoys hurting and torturing women. I don't know what to do. The first thing is to get him arrested." "No, I can't. He means what he says. He'd do exactly what he threatened," John said, almost hysterical. "Okay, calm down. Jean, you have to do something. You can't let him keep doing this. I know, but what can I do?" "Don't worry, we'll figure something out. What's his name?" "I'll have Dave check on him. Maybe he's wanted for something else. Maybe we can get him arrested for that." Belle noticed the fear in Jean's eyes. "Don't worry. I'll tell Dave the situation. He wouldn't do anything to put you or your parents in danger." Belle picked up her phone and called her husband, a Cook County officer who worked at the DA's office. She gave him the information. "Belle, where did this happen?" he asked. "In his apartment in Wheeling. Then she should call there. Tell her to ask for the Sexual Assault Division and file a complaint. We can't do anything for her otherwise." "Can't you check if that guy is wanted anywhere?" his wife asked. "Please, yeah, I can do that. Give me half an hour and I'll call you back," he said. "Thanks, love, I appreciate it," she replied, hanging up the phone. Belle turned to her friend. "Okay, Dave's going to check for us. Let's go to lunch while we wait." Jean liked that idea. She needed a break from the office. The two friends went to the restaurant nearby. They had just started eating when Dave called back. "Belle, the guy's clean, not even a parking ticket. If Jean won't file a complaint, there's nothing we can do." "Dave, she can't. The guy said even if he's in jail, he can get his friends to do something. If he's caught, who knows what he would do to Jean or her parents." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. "I have an idea, but Jean might not like it." He finally said, "What's your idea?" she asked. "Call her ex." "Who, Dalton? What could he do that you can't? Are you kidding? Dalton has his own team of tough guys. Dave Weiland and he go way back, and his reporter friend is very clever." "Who's Dave Weiland?" asked Belle. "He's a sergeant with the Arlington Hills Police. He was there when Jean got arrested. If those three worked together, I wouldn't want to be the guy they're after." "Hold on," Belle said, looking at Jean. "He says to call Dalton." Jean's eyes went wide. "No," she said firmly. "I don't want him involved. He could get hurt, Belle. Absolutely not." "Honey," Belle said into the phone, "she doesn't want to involve him. She's afraid he'll get hurt. Ask her how Dalton will feel if something happens to her and he finds out he could have helped." Belle put the phone on speaker so Jean could hear. "I don't care," Jean said. "He has a beautiful wife and a new baby. No, I won't drag him into my problems." Belle could see the bruises on Jean's wrists. She didn't care what her friend said. Something had to be done. "Would you call him?" she asked her husband. "Me? Yeah, I'll call him." "No," Jean screamed into the phone. "Honey, you need help. Let Dave call him and just talk about it," Belle told her. "Dalton's a grown man. He can take care of himself." Jean hung her head and began to cry. "Dave, can you call him and let him know Jean's in trouble? Just see what he says." "Sure, honey." "Meanwhile, she needs a safe place to stay," he replied. "What about her parents? Should we tell them too?" "Yeah, them too." He sighed. "When is she seeing this guy again? Does she know?" "Yeah, he said he won't be around until next weekend." Okay, that gives us some time. Tell her to stay strong. We won't let anything happen to her or her parents. When Jean heard him on the speakerphone, she cried from a mix of fear and relief. A waitress came over and asked if everything was okay. Belle said Jean had received some good news and was crying from happiness. Jean didn't really want Dalton involved, but she would feel safer if he agreed to help her. She always felt safe when he was nearby. Dalton was taking pictures for a hotel brochure when his phone rang. "Hello, Dalton Conrad," he said, not recognizing the number. "Hi, Dalton. It's Dave Quinn. How are you?" "Hey, Dave. Long time no see. I'm good. How about you?" "Good. Thanks." "Dalton, Jean is in trouble." "What do you mean?" "What kind of trouble?" "She got involved with some guy and he beat her up badly from what Belle told me." Dalton felt his anger rising. He thought there was nothing worse than a man who hits a woman. "Where is she? Is she in the hospital?" "No, she's not hurt that bad. She's just bruised and sore. She missed work yesterday, but she's there today," Dave reassured him. "Who is this guy?" "Some guy she met at a meeting. He was nice at first. She even took him to dinner with her folks. Then he lost it. He kept her at his place all last weekend, tied her up and put a rope around her neck before beating her. Jean said she thought he was going to kill her." "Shit!" Dalton shouted. He took a deep breath to calm down. "Are you going to arrest this guy? I'm afraid it's not that simple. He made all kinds of threats toward Jean and her parents. She's too scared to press charges. I already checked. He doesn't have a record, so what do we do? Any ideas? I could go over and have a talk with him. Jean wants you to stay out of it. She's worried you'll get hurt. She knows me better than that," he replied angrily. "She knows how I feel about guys who hit women." "Where does this guy live?" Dalton asked. "Well, it might not be that easy," Dave replied. Dave explained that Kevin had threatened Jean. He said he had friends who would hurt both her and her parents if anything happened to him or if he went to jail. "That's why I called you. Maybe you and your reporter friend can find a way to scare this guy off. I don't know if he really has friends like he said, but we can't take a chance. Belle wants me to put them under police protection, but I can't do that." "No, of course not," Dalton said. "Okay, listen. He told Jean he wouldn't see her again until the weekend, so you've got a few days to figure something out. If there's anything I can do within the law, I'd be happy to help." "Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you telling me." They ended the call. Dalton went down to the hotel's restaurant to grab some food and think. Since Jean was not in immediate danger, he decided to talk to his wife first before getting involved in Jean's problems. He didn't think she would mind, but he didn't want to hide anything from her. That night, after putting their baby to bed, Dalton told Tracy about his conversation with Dave Quinn. "Oh, honey, that's terrible. You have to help her," Tracy said before he even asks. Dalton smiled at his caring wife. "Thanks, babe. I was hoping you'd feel that way. You don't mind, then?" "Mind? Of course not. You can't let that poor girl get hurt. That's awful." Dalton leaned in and gently kissed his wife. "You're amazing. You know that? I love you so much," he told her before kissing her again. Together, they walked upstairs. When they reached the bedroom, Dalton took her in his arms and looked into her loving eyes. They kissed again. "Don't move," he said softly. Tracy's heart beat faster when he used that tone. "Yes," she said. Dalton slowly began to unbutton Tracy's blouse. Her body trembled as he took off her clothes. "One piece at a time. On the bed," he said firmly. "You know what to do." When she was done, Tracy crawled into bed and snuggled close to her husband. As they enjoyed the warmth of their love, she had a thought. "Honey, just don't get yourself in trouble, okay?" "Huh," he murmured, already half asleep. "When you help Jean, just don't get into trouble." "I won't, babe, I promise. I'll call Jack in the morning. Together we should figure out a plan to deal with this idiot." Tracy felt confident in her husband and safe in his embrace. Soon she fell asleep. "Jack Northrop, please." "Hold on, Jack. There's a call on line 4. "This is Jack Northrop. How can I help?" "Jack, it's Dalton. I need your help, old buddy." After finishing his job at the hotel, Dalton met his friend at Plato's Place, a bar they both liked. Jack Northrop was an investigative crime reporter for the biggest newspaper in the state. He was well respected by all the police agencies he worked with. Dalton and Jack had been friends since the days when Dalton worked at the same paper as a photographer. Over the years, their friendship had grown strong. "So what do you think?" Dalton asked after explaining Jean's situation. "I want to go over there and beat the guy up. but everyone's worried he might have friends who could go after Jean and her parents. We need to handle this without him knowing Jean is involved. I'll give you this, Dalton. You never make things easy. Does Tracy know about this? Oh yeah, we talked about it last night. She's on board. Okay, do you know his habits? What he likes and dislikes besides beating up women? No, not really. Dave Quinn checked him out and said he's clean. No arrest warrants. That's all I know. What about his job? Do you know where he works? He works as a service manager at some Cadillac dealership, but I don't know which one. All right, that's a start. You said he lives in Wheeling. There aren't any Cadillac dealerships within 10 miles from there, so he probably leaves early and gets home late. That gives us a chance to search his place tomorrow. Maybe we'll find something useful. How are we going to get in without him knowing? Jack looked at Dalton as if he had been insulted. Come on. Do you really think I can't pick the lock on an apartment door? You should know better. Dalton smiled. Sorry, old buddy. I almost forgot who I was talking to. I guess you did, Jack replied with a big grin. Can you meet me there early tomorrow morning? Most guys have to be at work by 7. I'd like to be in the parking lot around 6 to make sure he doesn't call in sick. Then we'll wait half an hour before going in. So do you at least know what he looks like? No, but I know what car he drives. It's got dealer plates. It shouldn't be too hard to find. I'll see you at 6, said Jack, finishing his beer. I'll be there, my friend. Thanks a lot for this. At dinner, Tracy got worried when she heard what Jack and her husband were planning to do. He told her Jack knew what he was doing. The next morning, the two friends didn't have to wait long. They saw a well-built man get into his Escalade and drive off. I checked, Jack said. The nearest Cadillac dealer is 12 miles away. I doubt he'll come back for lunch. We should have plenty of time. A guy like that has something to hide. They waited a bit to make sure Kevin wasn't coming back. Jack took about 30 seconds to pick the lock, and then they were inside. Dalton felt strange. He had never broken into a place before. He felt a bit nervous as he looked around. The place was messy with dirty dishes in the sink and a smelly wet towel hanging over a chair. Okay, said Jack. You check his computer first. Do you know how to find email addresses? Yeah, Dalton answered. All right, while you do that, I'll check the bedroom. If you go through any drawers or anything, put everything back like it was. Got it. Dalton turned on the computer. Since Kevin lived alone, he didn't protect anything with passwords. Everything was open. After a while, Jack joined him. Man, his bedroom's full of strange stuff, but nothing we can use. How about you? Look at this. He takes pictures of people, Dalton said, showing the computer screen. Look, here's Jean. Look at all the bruises. What a jerk. I want to confront this guy, Jack. I don't know. He looked pretty strong. You sure you could take him? I don't know, but I'd be willing to try, Dalton replied. Did you save all that stuff? Yeah, I got everything on a thumb drive, but I don't know what good it will do us. These people might not be from around here. I don't recognize any of them. How are we going to find them? I'm not sure it will help, but take it just in case. You never know. Come on, let's keep looking, Jack suggested. After 2 hours, they hadn't found anything more than the pictures on the computer. Dalton was getting discouraged. Come on, there's nothing here. Let's get out of here before we get caught. Hey, Dalton, look at the books this guy reads. You can learn a lot about someone by their books. Dalton went over to the small bookcase to take a look. They're all about the mafia and organized crime, mostly about Chicago. You don't think this guy's connected, do you? Those friends he mentioned, you don't suppose? Nah, Jack said. There's no way the cops wouldn't know about him if he was really connected. He's probably just pretending. He might think hitting women makes him look like a mobster. Well, we haven't found anything to help Jean. Let's go. It's Thursday, and I have to find a way to get her and her parents out of town before this jerk knows they're gone. That afternoon, Jean sat at her desk. She was getting nervous again. Belle kept telling her not to worry, but she hadn't heard from anyone since she told the truth on Tuesday. Her mind was in a fog when she felt like someone was watching her. She looked up and saw the tall figure of the only man she ever loved, standing in her doorway. Hi, Jean, he said with a smile. Dalton, she whispered softly. She wanted to run to him to feel the warmth she once knew as his wife, but she couldn't. It wouldn't happen again, and she knew it. Seeing him brought back so many good memories. Come in. Can I get you something, coffee? No, thanks. I stopped by because your friend's husband called me, he said, sitting in a chair across from her desk. Why didn't you call me? Why did I have to hear you were in trouble from Dave Quinn? Jean looked down. Dalton, I didn't want my mistake to cause trouble for you and Tracy. I've already caused enough. He sighed. Jean, that's all in the past. We're both moving on with our lives, but that doesn't mean I'd stand by while someone hurts you. You know better than that. That's exactly why Okay, forget it, he said. Right now, we need to figure out a way to get you out of this mess. Jack and I are working on it, but for now, you and your parents need to go somewhere safe. I talked to your boss. He's giving you next week off. You can take it as paid vacation or unpaid leave. Your choice. But I want you completely out of sight next week. You and your folks. Jean felt better just knowing Dalton was helping her. Here's the plan. We'll make Kevin think you and your folks are out of town for a family emergency so he won't look for you. Tomorrow, your parents will call him and say they're looking for you. They'll tell him it's a family emergency. A couple of hours later, you'll call him pretending you're at the airport. You'll say your aunt is very sick and you and your parents are flying out to see her. You'll tell him you're not sure when you'll be back. Your friends and family know about this plan. If he calls them, they will say you had to go out of town for an emergency and they don't know when you'll be back. While you're gone, you'll be safe in a hotel. Eric Watts will stay with you. Who's Eric Watts? Jean asked. He's the other cop who was with Dave Weiland when you got arrested. Oh no, Dalton, I can't see him again. I'll be so embarrassed, she shouted. Jean, he's a cop. I'm sure he's seen worse things since then. Besides, he offered to help. He has vacation time and wants to spend it protecting you and your family. Don't refuse his help. But she said, shaking her head, where will we all stay? I don't have the money to pay for a hotel for everyone for a week. Don't worry about it. I've got it covered. I'm making a brochure for the Brownstone Hotel downtown. I made a deal with them. I agreed to charge them a bit less for the brochure in exchange for 2 rooms. You and your family will have a 2-bedroom suite on the 12th floor. Eric will be in the next room, and they're connected in case you need anything. You'll also have free food. You can eat at the hotel's restaurant and just charge it to the room. You won't even have to leave the hotel. Oh, Dalton, I can't let you do all this. How will I ever repay you? Enough, he said sharply. It's all set, so don't worry about it. He stood up. Pack up what you need tonight and bring it with you tomorrow. After work, you'll meet me at your parents' place. They'll make the first call from there. Then we're all going to the hotel. You'll make the second call from the hotel after you're settled in and then turn off your phone. The room is reserved under Conrad's photography, so not even the hotel staff will know who's staying there. He turned to leave. Don't worry, Joan, he said, looking back as he reached the door and smiling. We're going to catch this guy. Just as he was about to leave, Belle walked up. Dalton, I assume this means you're going to help Jean? Without saying a word, he smiled, gave her a small kiss on the cheek, and walked out. Belle looked at her smiling friend behind the desk. Okay, what's going on? I just heard you have a family emergency and won't be here next week. Is everything all right? Belle, honey, everything is much better than all right, she said, grinning widely. The next day after work, Jean packed her things and drove to her parents' house as planned. Once they had loaded the luggage into the car and were ready to go, Jean's mom called Kevin's home phone and left an urgent message on his answering machine before they left. Hello, Kevin, this is Audrey Barnes. Hello, we're searching for Jean. Is she with you? If so, could you please have her call us immediately? We have a family emergency, thank you. Jean remembered that terrible day from years ago very clearly. As soon as she saw Eric in the hotel lobby, she knew who he was, even without his uniform. Dalton was the first to greet him. Hi, Eric, he said while shaking his hand. Thank you for doing this. You're a lifesaver. Eric smiled and answered, Are you kidding? A free week in a fancy hotel like this? Who wouldn't say yes? He then turned to Jean and noticed her rosy cheeks. Hi, John, he said, shaking her hand. Nice to see you again. Jean shyly took his hand and then introduced him to her parents. Some hotel staff came over with their bags and showed everyone to their rooms. Jean's mother looked around the room, her mouth wide open. Oh, Dalton, this is amazing. Everyone agreed and thanked Dalton again and again as they admired the fancy suite. Once they settled in, Jean called Kevin's cell phone. She was glad when it went to voicemail so she could leave a message instead of talking to him directly. Kevin, this is Jean. I'm sorry to call with such short notice, but my aunt is very sick, and I'm flying out with Mom and Dad to see her before she passes. I'll call you when I get back. Perfect, said Dalton. Now turn off your phone and keep it off. If I need you, I'll call the room. Eric was standing nearby and saw Jean's worried tears. "Don't worry," he said softly. "Everything's going to be okay. I promise no one will hurt you." "Okay, what now?" thought Dalton as he got into his car to leave. Just then, his phone rang. It was Jack. "Jack, I hope you have good news for me." Dalton heard Jack laugh a little on the other end. That was a good sign. "Dalton, how soon can you meet me at Play-Dose?" Well, the traffic should be easing up now. Depending on the Kennedy, I'd say about 35-40 minutes. Great. See you there." Dalton was eager to hear what Jack had in mind. He sat down on a stool next to his friend and ordered a beer. "So what's up?" Jack slid some photographs on the table. "See these two guys?" Dalton looked at the pictures. They were taken in different places and at different times, but all showed the same two guys. Sometimes they were together or with other people, but most of the pictures showed each guy alone. "Yeah, who are they?" he asked. "This," Jack said, pointing at one of the photos, "is Billy, the button, Spinozo. He's a hitman for the mob in Detroit. And his partner," Jack pointed to another picture, "is Johnny Iota, also a hitman for the mob." Dalton felt a bit worried. He didn't know where Jack was heading with this. "You're not telling me these are the friends that Jerk was talking about?" No, Jack replied quickly, "but they will play a key role in getting our boy out of town quickly and for good. Okay, Jack. Usually I can figure you out, but now I'm lost. How are these guys going to help? Are you planning to have the guy killed?" Jack laughed. "No, nothing that extreme, but you're close." Jack took a drink of his beer and smiled, feeling clever. He had pulled off a few tricks before, often with some help from the law, but this one would be big. "Dalton, do you remember when Sal DeMarco was killed a couple of years ago? They found his body in the trunk of his car at O'Hare Airport?" "Yeah, sure. He was important in the Chicago crime gang. I remember they found his body. Why?" "Well, it was never proven, but people think these two guys did it. Sal's brother, Tony DeMarco, was so sure he put a $50,000 bounty on them. No one has seen them since. The feds don't know if someone got the bounty or if they left the country." "Where did you get these photos?" Dalton asked. "From the feds. When we saw those books at that jerk's apartment yesterday, I had an idea. This morning, I went over to the federal building to see if I could get some of their surveillance photos, and here we are." "Okay, but I still don't get how these will help Jean." "My artistic friend, that's where you come in," Jack said. When Dalton got home that night, he couldn't hide his excitement. He had to share Jack's clever plan with his wife. "Oh, honey, the guy's going to be so scared. I love it." She laughed. "Can I help?" "Well, I'm not sure what you can do. It's kind of a one-man job." Seeing her disappointed face, he added, "But I'm sure we can find something for you. Come on, we need to study these photos and choose the right ones." Tracy went with Dalton to his office. They looked at the surveillance photos together, picking the best ones for their plan. He copied the pictures he wanted to take with him. "Do you think 4 pictures are enough?" asked Tracy. "Yeah, there will be more. Jack is working on some stuff, too. Please be careful. I don't know what I'd do if something happened to you," Tracy said, looking into his eyes and giving him a kiss. "I'll be careful, babe. I've dealt with tougher people before. I know what I'm doing," he said to ease her worries. "I can't do anything until Monday anyway. The weekend is too unpredictable, and I don't want to waste it sitting in some parking lot." On Monday, while Dalton started working on Jack's plan, Eric Watts was stepping into the shower of his fancy hotel room. He couldn't believe he got such a big chance. The first time Eric saw Jean was over 4 years ago when they broke into her motel room and arrested her and her lover for cheating. Later, he learned that Jean wanted to try some risky games, but was scared to tell Dalton, her husband, at the time. Instead, she tried it with a co-worker. When Dalton found out, he was furious and filed a complaint against her and her lover. When they broke into the room, Jean was handcuffed to the bed and blindfolded. Eric often thought about her afterward. He didn't care about the risky games, but there was something about Jean that touched him. She was so scared and vulnerable when her life fell apart. He wanted to hug her and tell her it would be okay. He couldn't do that then, but maybe he would get another chance. Dalton sat in his car outside Kevin's apartment waiting. He chose a spot he thought would give him good pictures. He didn't know how long it would take, but he hoped to finish quickly. He followed Kevin to work and took more pictures. By the end of the day, Dalton had over 300 pictures of Kevin. "I'm glad Tracy offered to help," Dalton thought. "It's going to take all night to look through these." When he walked into the house that night, Tracy greeted him with a big hug and kiss. "How did it go?" "Pretty good," he said. "I got lots of shots. I'm sure we can find some that match." "You're still on board to help out, right?" Dalton asked. Tracy smiled and shook her head. She loved working on projects with her husband. She thought it would be a lot of fun. "Good," he said. "I really need your help." That night, after dinner and after singing Taylor to sleep with a lullaby, Dalton and Tracy started their project. They worked late into the night, but were disappointed. Out of all the photos Dalton took, only one was good enough. "Well, one down, 3 to go," Dalton said with a forced smile. The next day, Dalton felt more confident. He learned from his mistakes and was sure he would have more usable photos. Around noon. His phone rang. "How's it going, buddy?" Jack asked. "I'm getting there, Jack. How about you?" "I dug through the paper's archives and found a ton of stuff. We've got enough to really surprise our friend." "I'll have to tell Tracy," Dalton joked. "She thinks he's just going to be shocked. When do you think you'll have everything we need?" "Got anything yet?" "Yeah, I got one from yesterday. I hope to get the rest by the end of today, but it'll take a couple more nights to finish everything. We should be ready by Thursday. And Jean and her folks are set until when, Friday?" "Yeah, until noon Saturday, actually. If it takes longer, I'll have to sort something out. We should be okay." They ended their call when Kevin left the dealership. He walked to a nearby restaurant. By the end of the day, Dalton was sure he had enough photos. Now it was time for some computer editing. "Oh, honey," Tracy said as she watched Dalton work, "these look perfect. No one will know they're not real." Dalton smiled. His wife was right. They were perfect. "Maybe I'm in the wrong business. I could make more money doing this." "Don't you get any ideas?" she teased. "We're doing just fine. I'm tired. I'll finish the last one tomorrow. I rescheduled my shoots this week so I can stay home with you and Taylor. I'll work on the brownstone brochure and finish this project. Then maybe we can all go to the park." By the end of Wednesday, Dalton felt great. He had finished the brownstone brochure and it was ready for the printer. He and Tracy had spent a couple of hours playing with Taylor in the park. He also finished the last photo for Jack's plan. "Ah, time to relax," he said as he stretched out in his chair. "Can I see?" Tracy asked. "Of course, my darling." Tracy looked at all the photos again. "Ah, maybe you should hold off on relaxing just yet, hubby." That caught his attention. He sat up straight. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Look here," she said, pointing to the recent photo he edited. "You can see the guy's reflection in the store window, but Kevin doesn't have one." "Oh, no." Dalton groaned, leaning back in his chair. "Maybe he won't see it," she suggested. "No, we can't risk it. These need to be perfect," he replied. "Sorry," she said. "Don't worry about it. You caught something that could have ruined everything. I owe you big time." Tracy smiled, already thinking of how she would have him repay her. "Can you fix it?" "Yeah, it's tough, but I can do it," he said. Tracy watched as Dalton brought the photo back up on his computer. "Now," he said after carefully working on it, "let's blend this. How's that?" He showed Tracy the screen, smiling. "Wow, that looks great. It's still early. I'll call Jack and let him know we're ready." They planned to meet for an early lunch the next day. Jack had everything he needed. Since Dalton had finished his part, they could move forward in the afternoon. Kevin was in a bad mood. He'd had a rough day at work and hadn't heard from Jean. All week he wondered if her trip was real or just a way to avoid him. Either way, he would make sure she wouldn't do it again. It was after 7:30 when he stumbled home, tired and upset. At first, he didn't notice the large manila envelope leaning against his computer screen. He took a shower, changed into casual clothes, and was about to microwave a frozen dinner when he saw it. "What the?" he muttered. He picked up the package carefully. Feeling uneasy, he realized someone had been in his apartment. He looked around the room, worried someone might be hiding. He checked behind the couch, the drapes by the sliding doors, and even looked out at the balcony. Listening carefully, he grabbed a knife from the kitchen and crept into the bedroom, finding nothing. Once sure he was alone, he sat at the kitchen table and opened the package carefully. Inside were newspaper clippings, some 8x10 color photos, and a note. He examined the photos first. "That's me," he mumbled. "But who are these other guys?" Confused, he started reading the newspaper articles. "Oh no, these are the same two guys, but Kevin didn't know what was going on yet. He saw the same two men in the photos with him in a newspaper story. Chicago. Police are looking for Billy, the Button, Spinozo, and Johnny Iota because of Sal DeMarco's death. Kevin's stomach turned as he read about Sal DeMarco's murder and the two suspects who went missing. He picked up the photos again and looked at them closely. There was no doubt. The men in the photos were the same ones in the newspaper, but he couldn't remember ever meeting them. Yet there he was, 4 pictures of him talking to both killers. Kevin's forehead was sweaty. His hands shook as he read the note. This is a warning. Tony has photos showing you with Spinozo and Iota. He thinks you're involved in his brother's death. He's hired 2 hitmen from Baltimore who will arrive on tonight's late flight. If I were you, I would leave town before they get here. Tony will keep looking for you, so don't stay in one place for too long and stay hidden. And whatever you do, don't ever come back to Chicago. Tony will know right away and you'll be dead within an hour. A friend. Kevin ran to the bathroom and puked. How? He asked himself. I never saw those guys before. I know I haven't. The photos must be fake, he thought. He wiped his mouth and looked at the photos again. There was no sign they were fake. Kevin almost fainted when his phone rang. His whole body shook as he looked at the screen. It was a downtown number, but one he didn't know. Should he answer it? It rang again. His hand shook so much he could barely press the button. Hello, he answered nervously. Is this Kevin McMichaels? Asked a scary voice. Just listen. Did you get the information I left for you? Yes, but I shut up and listen. 2 days ago, Tony got those pictures of you with Spinozo and Iota. He freaked out. He had no idea there was a third person involved in his brother's murder. But I wasn't there. I don't even know these guys. Please believe me. Pictures don't lie, fool. Look, I don't care if it's true or not. If Tony thinks you were involved, that's all that matters. I'm trying to save your life here. Got it? Yes, sir. Good. Listen, it only took Tony 1 day to find out who you are. He put a price on your head and got 2 guys from Baltimore. They're flying into O'Hare a little after 1 in the morning. I think they're planning to visit you right after they land at O'Hare. They'll be back in Baltimore before anyone finds out you're gone. You don't have much time. Take only what you can carry and leave town as fast as you can. Yeah, okay, I get it. But who are you and why are you helping me? Let's just say I have my reasons. Look, my watch says you have a little over 4 hours to disappear. You better get moving, and remember, don't stay in one place too long and don't do anything that stands out. Tony will likely put a 50 grand bounty on you just like he did with your 2 friends. I'm packing right now, Kevin said, tearing up. Hello. There was no answer. The call had ended. Jack left the phone booth and called Dalton on his cell. The trap is set. Are you ready? Yes, I'm in the back of the parking lot. I can see his car clearly. I'll call you as soon as I see something. Actually, if you don't mind, I'm going home to spend time with my wife and kids. Okay, thanks again. Gene owes you big time. Let's see if it works first. He sounded really scared on the phone. You should see him packing his car soon. Jack, speak of the devil, he's starting now. He just ran outside and threw some clothes in the back seat. Then he ran back inside. Dalton said, smiling. I'm going to take some pictures for Jean. Maybe it'll remind her to be more careful about who she dates. He laughed. Dalton stayed and watched as Kevin made trip after trip to his car, each time carrying more of his things. It took about an hour and a half before Kevin finally jumped in the driver's seat and sped off. Just to be sure, Dalton followed him to another highway and watched as Kevin headed west until he was out of sight. Dalton then took the next exit and headed home. Tracy rushed up and hugged him tightly, kissing him as soon as he walked in. Well, she asked with a mix of fear and excitement. He's gone, Dalton told her. He got onto I-88 and headed west. My guess is he won't stop until he reaches Omaha. He laughed. Does Jean know? No, it's after 11. I'll call her in the morning. They're probably all asleep by now. I doubt it, said Tracy. I think you should call now. They'll sleep much better knowing they have nothing more to worry about. Dalton thought for a moment. Maybe you're right, he said, pulling out his phone. Jean's dad picked up the phone after just 2 rings. Hello, he said. Hi, Henry. It's Dalton, replied Dalton. Oh, Dalton, is everything okay? Henry asked, sounding worried because of the late hour. Henry, everything is great, Dalton said happily. We have Kevin on the run. I don't think any of us will hear from him again. Can you put Jean on the line, or is she in bed? No, she's down in the bar with Eric. Oh, really? Is there any spark between them? Dalton asked, sounding curious. It's hard to tell, Henry said. We've all been under a lot of stress, but I hope so. I really like Eric. He's a good young man. They've been spending more time together, and I think Jean is starting to like him. Good, laughed Dalton. I think I'm starting to see why Eric was so eager to help. Well, if they're in the bar, I'll call him and give them something to celebrate. Oh, Henry, there's no rush to leave the room. You have until noon on Saturday. Tracy listened to the conversation and smiled at Dalton as he dialed Eric's cell phone. Dalton, Eric answered, a bit surprised to hear from him so late. What's up? Nothing's wrong. Is Jean with you? Dalton asked. Yeah, she's right here. Why? Well, my friend, you can tell her she won't hear from Kevin anymore. She doesn't have to worry about him coming back. He thinks the Chicago mob is after him, and he's escaping from the state right now. The mob laughed. Eric? How did you manage that? Wait, Dalton, Jean is here looking confused. Let me tell her. Eric looked at Jean with a big smile. Don't ask me how, but Dalton says they made Kevin believe the mob is after him. He's running scared right now. Jean almost knocked the phone from his hand as she jumped from her stool and hugged Eric. In her excitement, she kissed him on the lips. Oh, I'm sorry, she said, quickly breaking the kiss. I didn't mean don't be sorry, replied Eric. I've wanted to do that all week. Jean smiled. She was starting to like Eric a lot. Is he sure? No more Kevin? Here, talk to him yourself, Eric said, handing her the phone. Dalton, really? Is Kevin really gone? Jean asked. Yes, Jean, he's really gone, Dalton said, happy to tell her. I doubt you'll ever hear from him again. But if you do, let me know right away, okay? Yes, Dalton. How can I ever thank you? She said, feeling grateful. By finding a nice guy, he told her. I'm working on that right now, she replied, smiling at Eric. Good. Now you have something to celebrate. You guys have fun, okay? Dalton said goodbye and hung up, smiling at Tracy. I think there might be something between Eric and Jean, he told her. Wouldn't that be great? Yes, it would, replied Tracy. Jean made a big mistake, but she's been through a lot. She deserves to be happy. You know what you should do? Since we don't need to leave the hotel until Saturday, let's have dinner there tomorrow night. We'll make it a party with Jean's parents, Jack and Lynette, Jean and Eric, and you and me. That's a wonderful idea, honey. It's too late to call Jack now because I don't want to wake Lynette or the kids, but I'll call him first thing tomorrow morning. I hope they can join us. So that's another good idea from me, she said with a smile. And you still owe me for noticing the reflection in the window. Come on upstairs. I want to collect on that. By the time they reached the bed, Tracy had already taken off half her clothes. She tossed her bra into a corner and seductively slid her panties down before playfully kicking them toward Dalton. Come here, she said firmly. I want you to make me happy before you even think of anything else. Yes, ma'am, Dalton said, following her lead. He thought she deserved to be the boss for a night. The next morning he called Jack early and confirmed dinner for the night. Then he called the restaurant to make reservations. Their table was the loudest in the restaurant that night. Everyone laughed a lot, often at Kevin's expense, as Dalton shared pictures of a scared-looking bully hurriedly packing his car and leaving fast. Jack, how did you come up with such a clever plan? Eric asked. Oh, Eric, you don't know my husband very well if you have to ask that, Lynette joked. Meanwhile, Tracy saw Jean's mother holding Jean's hand. Jean looked emotional. What's wrong, honey? She asked. Jean tried to hide her tears, but everyone had noticed. She wiped her cheeks and said, I'm just so thankful. You guys went through so much for me. How can I ever thank you? I feel like I don't deserve friends like you. She grabbed a tissue to dry her eyes. Eric put his arm around her. Hey, none of that talk. Do you hear me? That's right, Dalton said. No more punishing yourself, okay? From now on, it's only good times ahead, right, Jean? Jean smiled through her tears and nodded. She hoped Dalton was right. It had been a long time since she felt happy. Maybe this help was a sign of better things to come. A few minutes later, while everyone was waiting for dessert and coffee, Eric excused himself to go to the men's room. Dalton waited a moment and then excused himself as well. Eric was washing his hands when Dalton walked in and leaned against the door, crossing his arms. So what are your plans with my ex-wife? Dalton asked firmly. Eric was surprised by his friend's serious tone. What? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I've seen you and Jean exchanging looks all night. Are you two together? Dalton asked, smiling a little. Eric relaxed a bit when he saw Dalton smile. He smiled back. No, we've only known each other for a week. What about the whole bondage thing? Are you into that? Can you give her what she wants? If anyone else had asked, Eric would have told them to leave him alone, but he knew Dalton was just looking out for Jean. Well, to be honest, we talked about it. No, I'm not into that. And funny thing, she said she doesn't want that anymore after what happened with Kevin. She said it was the helplessness that excited her, but when she was really scared and helpless, it lost its charm. Dalton smiled, grew wider. If I were you, I'd take her to my room and show her some gentle, caring love. I don't want her to think I'm taking advantage of her when she's feeling weak, Eric said, hesitating. Listen, man, she needs you. I see it every time I'm with her. She's still beating herself up over our breakup 5 years ago. She needs someone who will treat her right. I think that someone is you. Thanks, Dalton, Eric replied. I think I might take your advice. When they went back to the table, Dalton sat down, but Eric stood behind Jean. He leaned down and whispered something in her ear. Whatever he said made her smile brightly. Hey, everyone, Jean said. I'm really tired and need to rest. I hope you don't mind if Eric walks me to my room. Everyone at the table said their goodbyes before Jean and Eric put their arms around each other and headed to the elevators. About half an hour later, the party ended. Everyone had such a good time that they all agreed they should get together more often. On their way home, Tracy asked, What did you and Eric talk about in the men's room? Whatever it was sure made Jean happy. When Dalton told her about their conversation, she laughed. What's so funny? He asked. It's just so ironic, she pointed out. Think about it. You and your ex-wife split up because she was afraid to tell you about her interest in being tied up and wanting someone else to take charge. Then I came into the picture and now you're okay with being in control for my fantasy. It's funny how she's changed her mind about things now. Yeah, he replied. It is kind of strange, isn't it? The light is off in Jean's room. She must be in bed already, said Jean's dad as they walked into their hotel room. Oh, Harry, don't be silly, Jean's mom teased. She's in bed all right, but not in her own. Wait, you mean with Eric? Really? Yes, dear. Didn't you notice how close they were at dinner? She said as they headed to their bedroom. I wouldn't mind seeing them together, he added. I like Eric. It wouldn't hurt to have a cop in the family, he joked. As his wife reached to unzip her dress, Harry stepped behind her. Here, let me help, he said with a smile. You know, since Jean won't be next door and this is our last night in this lovely hotel ... It would be a shame not to use this big king-size bed for more than just sleeping. His wife of 35 years turned around, put her arms around his neck and kissed him deeply. If everyone talked about their night the next day, they would find that it was a night full of love all around. The following Monday, everyone was glad to see Jean back at work. They asked if everything with her family emergency was okay. She assured them it was and thanked them for their concern. Only Belle and her boss, Mr. Jacobson, knew the real story. Belle couldn't wait for lunch to hear the details. She couldn't stop laughing as Jean shared what happened. My husband was right on the money. He said if Jack and Dalton put their heads together, they'd figure something out, and they sure did. That's hilarious. Dave is going to laugh so hard when I tell him. That reminds me, Jean said, looking sly. What's it like being married to a cop? In Dave's case, it's great. He doesn't go out on patrol or anything. It's just a regular 9-to-5 job. Why? She asked, noticing the grin on her friend's face. What's going on, John? Well, Jean drew out the word. That cop Dalton asked to stay with us at the hotel. We're sort of seeing each other now. Jean, that's fantastic. Is he into, she whispered. The tying up stuff? No, and honestly, after being tied up and hurt by that crazy person, I'm done with all that. It's not that I don't trust Eric, but it would bring back bad memories. No, Eric is a great guy. He gives me everything I need. Oh, Jean, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. Thanks, Belle. And I'll tell you something. If this turns out to be the real deal and I'm lucky enough to get another shot at love, I won't mess up. I'll be the most faithful, loving, and caring wife anyone could ask for. Belle smiled. I know you will, dear. For the next few months, everyone kept an eye out for Kevin, but he never came back. Over time, he became just a bad memory. 6 months into their relationship, Eric asked Jean to marry him. 2 months later, Jean became Mrs. Eric Watts. At the wedding, Tracy found out she enjoyed spending time with Jean and her good friend Belle. The three of them became very close and would often meet for lunch. "Girls, I have news," Jean said, eager to tell her friends as they sat down at their favorite restaurant. She took a deep breath and blurted out, "I'm pregnant," she yelled. Everyone in the restaurant looked over as Belle and Tracy screamed with joy. "Congratulations," yelled Tracy, with Belle following. 3 weeks later, it happened again, but this time, it was Tracy making the announcement. A few short weeks later, both women had baby bumps as they sat down for their weekly lunch. Only Belle was left. Almost 4 months later, she said she was late by more than 2 weeks. A home pregnancy test confirmed it. For the rest of her life, Jean never forgot the lessons she learned during the hardest times. She never took her wonderful husband or her 3 sons for granted. She treated them all with love and respect. Every morning when she woke up, she said a small prayer, thanking God for her family, her friends, and for giving her a second chance. Hey, audience, if you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.